So we'll call the meeting to order. It's right on time, 6:30, and that is going to be the theme for tonight, staying on time. Tom Ayers, the Select Board member, is going to just be a little late, so he said it'd be all right to get started without him. So the first item is additions and deletions or changes to the agenda. No, I think we have none. The next item, number 3, is interview and possible appointment of our candidate for zoning administrator. Do you want
Sure.
to start us off?
Suzanne is before you, having run the gauntlet. If you recall, we've been partnering with Richmond to advertise to what are 2 separate 20-hour positions to create one 40-hour opportunity, but working separately for the 2 municipalities. We ended up doing 3 interviews this round. So there was an initial interview process with Alex and I and our counterparts in Richmond. There was another interview with some planning commissioners from each place, and then interviews with the planning commission as a whole in each place. And then, so she's here before you, having passed through all of that, having passed the reference check, and still willing and excited to serve as zoning administrator. And so the standard, what's required by statute is you formally appoint the zoning administrator to this position. So we've fully vetted. Here we are tonight, and now it's your job.
Hi, Suzanne. Sure, why not? It's
And we're trying something out here to see if it works.
So we did have your resume, that was forwarded to us. I don't know if any of the board members have any specific questions or.
Well, oftentimes the zoning administrator is seen as the bad guy, and I'm wondering if you could give some examples of how you've dealt with kind of conflict and people who may not be happy with decisions that you're making.
Right. Well, of course, I am a mother, so I deal with my kids all the time, so, and they're still alive, so it's okay. But then in work, when I worked at T. Rowe Price as a facilities coordinator, which was doing design work, but also overseeing various projects and things. And it was always, trying to get various managers or people that might have issues with their office. Maybe they really think that they needed a bigger office because they thought they should, and it was just kind of talking to them and letting the people know how what it was, trying to get them to be calm, I guess, about it. So I do know that, and I'm sure it would be a similar type thing that you just can't get too upset. You don't want them to be upset. You want to be calm.
So
I hope.
Do you know what causes stress for you?
Being yelled at sometimes.
Being yelled at?
It's not never fun to be yelled at, but hopefully you can work with a person to try to find a mutually beneficial outcome. So.
As we go towards this new experiment that we're trying with 2 towns, and we're trying it on you, what are your thoughts on this idea? I mean, obviously, it's agreeable to you. You're applying for this, but how do you see this kind of issues might this cause? I was trying to think through it myself and think, serving 2 towns, 2 responsibilities.
Right. 2 masters.
Yeah, that kind of idea. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it is unusual,
Yeah.
and so I'll let you know, I guess, how it works out. It should be. When we had our initial interview, that was just kind of one of my questions. It was like, am I going to be a half day here and then run around at lunch and go there, or I think it's 2
Hour here, 2 hours there, and then back an hour?
No, hopefully not.
Yeah?
But
Yeah.
I think it's kind of working with the towns to find out. I think it was more of like just to make sure that whatever the situation is, that it's consistent. So the people in the town know when I would be there. So,
One of the things I don't know, maybe you know, or Alex, where are we in the process? The same with Richmond? Or have they?
I'm going there tomorrow, or
Going
tonight,
tomorrow.
excuse me, like, after I leave you.
Oh, so you leave here and go to the Richmond Selectboard?
Yes.
Okay.
Mary?
I saw that most of your training and internships were in historic preservation. What overlaps do you see between that area and this job?
Well, it's also with design as well, in that I know that part of the job is, being able to read the plans or whatever that somebody might bring in, and I do have that ability. And for preservation, I was working in the planning and zoning for my internship down in Virginia, and worked, I shadowed the people that were my mentors, I guess, there. And so I do have, with preservation in what the schooling that I had, we had, various projects that we had to do, and, regarding historic properties. And I know that there are plenty here. I know that's not really part of my job, but that's something that's, I think I could bring to the position that maybe they don't have now.
So I think that it is a sort of a unique position, which, personally, I think we can work through it. I don't think it's an issue. I would guess that there'd be an expectation of certain days or hours of office, in both places. So there seems to be, even though you don't have an actual schedule at this point, the expectation there'll be some type of schedule that's, I won't say written in stone, but pretty much, so many, couple days here, a couple days there, maybe a day of flexibility or something, depending on the job. And you're in good rapport with the people in Richmond, so I think, Alex, you might get involved if there's a need for one town to have more time than the other, and
Yeah, that's why I'm wondering how that, myself, like,
Yeah.
what if all of a sudden there's a ton of activity in one town? I don't know really how that will work.
go ahead.
I know how that will work.
Okay, good.
Yes, good.
I'm not sure if this is on, but I'll pretend like it is. Yeah, so they are two separate positions. We're not job sharing, so my expectation will be that Suzanne would be working 20 hours for the town of Hinesburg, regardless of how busy it gets in Richmond. So that
Say Hinesburg got really busy.
I would have no expectation that we would get any more than 20 hours a week. They are two separate jobs. I'm not interested in doing tag teaming with the
Right.
planning or town administrator in Richmond, on a week-to-week basis. So it'll be consistent and separate in that regard. But what we said from the outset was that in the initial setting up of the hours and the days of the week, very flexible, and Richmond has an evening meeting component that we don't have, so there's no conflict on that front, and we'll work it out. But once we get it set, it'll be consistent from that point forward.
Well, I mean, I think, it's, go ahead, did you want to?
Have you had a chance to talk with the zoning administrator, other zoning administrators one-on-one to get a sense of the job?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Trust me, we gave her lots of information about the unique nature of the position, the challenges that it involves, the interesting personalities you get to deal with.
Okay, I mean, I think, I think this is an interesting job because there are a lot of specific challenges associated with it. And then the job sharing is unique, and so probably a little bit of a challenge. But for me personally, I know that, Suzanne, you come recommended by, everybody in the town that's gone through this process. So I think, unless we're in agreement, if we had a motion, we could probably move forward.
I move the Select Board appoint Suzanne Montegna as zoning administrator for a 3-year term commencing June 1st, 2017.
I'll second that.
Any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye? And none opposed?
The 3-year term,
That's
is
by-
that typically what we've?
It's by statute.
Oh, by statute, okay. All right, I know that there's the state is involved in that too, yeah, okay. Okay.
Okay, well, welcome aboard. I think you're with a great team, and certainly if any issues come up, work with Alex, but certainly, we want to make this work, so we expect it will.
Okay, great.
Great, thank you. Good luck in your next interview. I don't know, where is it? Okay, so you're doing it? Okay. All right, the next item on the agenda is the request for reduction in zoning fees, and I'll ask Trevor to lead us off here with maybe a little history of this.
Sure. So you've got a memo from Alex, and he and Mitch are both here, and I think Mr. Dennis is right here. The memo lays out, there are some fees that would otherwise be owed on a property. A lot of it ties back to work that was done, I believe, prior to when Mr. Dennis was the owner. And so what our rules and regulations require is for any reduction of fees has to be essentially that reduction has to come from all of you. Parties have worked out what seems like an agreeable amount based on the circumstances involved with this one. It seems like it's pretty straightforward, but you have all 3 individuals at your disposal should you have additional questions that weren't covered in the very thorough memo.
Yeah, and I appreciated that memo, and are there any specific questions from the board on this? And I think, as far as I know, I've been on the board for 5 years. I don't think this has ever come up to the board, a change in a reduction in some zoning fees. So this is an exception. I think it will continue to be an exception, but, for mitigating circumstances, I think. Any comments from the board, or?
Well, just wondering why don't you have to get your Bianchi thing, why it didn't get caught when the real estate transaction happened?
So Mr. Dennis might be able to address that better than I can as when he bought the property, but not all property sales involve a zoning compliance check or a Bianchi letter, as it's often referred to. I don't know if one was done in this case, but in any case, it didn't get picked up in 2006. This hasn't been dragging along since then. It definitely came up after Mr. Dennis bought the property and came in for another zoning permit and just trying to clean it up.
I would add that Bianchis weren't as popular back then as they are now, and they've really kind of gained as more of the norm.
And is the Bianchi part of the title search?
It's a request of the zoning administrator to go to look at the property, look at past permitting, to see if there's any issues.
Okay. So
And
that would
actually,
be,
a lot of permits and a lot of actually code enforcement actually takes place through that review.
okay. Any other questions from the board? Matt, did you have anything you wanted to add, or I assume you saw the memo here? Yeah.
And I actually sent an email to Mitch and Alex that I don't have any opposition to the fee that they have come up with. I just need an extension on paying it, that's all.
That was the beginning of July, or June you were looking for, so it's just.
That's correct.
If I'm trying to remember, I saw that traffic, so
Yeah,
yeah, so that's the time frame would be by end of first week of June or thereabouts-ish.
Yes, in that part, we
Yeah.
don't need June form. No.
Right.
We just need you for the consideration of the fee reduction.
Well, we always need you, we just don't need you to take action on that piece.
Any more questions?
I'll make a motion to reduce the zoning fee for Matt Dennis as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Department.
Second it?
Maybe in the memo dated April 21st, 2017?
Yeah.
Any more discussion?
Oh, second.
Oh,
I second.
Okay, sorry, I had my head down. Thank you, Mary Lee.
any more discussion? No? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Aye. None opposed, so the motion passes. Item 5 now is public comment. This is for you. Yeah, that would be good. Oh, you should, oh, you got the thing there. Yep, go
Okay.
ahead.
Some of you are familiar with me. I own the cattle over here and rent Gary Clark's property, and I just want to start out by saying that nobody's less happy about the conditions over there than me. And I'm asking the town a little bit of leniency. I'm sure most of you are aware that I have put some of my cows out of their winter pasture into the 5-acre plot over there just east of the sewage treatment plant at the command of the Humane Society. They've been very, very forceful in demanding that I move the cattle now, and I had no other option. And there was fence there, and it's been pasture for generations. And I was faced with either a trespassing order from the town or a criminal citation from the Humane Society. And I won't take up much of your time because I know that time is of the essence, but if anybody has any questions that they want, I'm here at the request of and the suggestion of Frank, the chief of police. Everybody's got suggestions, but my situation is very, very, very difficult. And I'm asking for a little leniency from the town, not permanent, just if I can keep them in there for a few more days, I'll get them out, and hopefully I can get Vermont Gas to do something with the gas line that went through there that really was a train wreck for me in an already desperate situation. It makes my farm almost unusable until the grass in the ground hardens. And there's a drainage issue there too that makes it even worse from the road. So I got a call from Eric from the town Sunday morning, and Eric was not happy. He left me a couple messages, but he didn't leave me a return phone number. I did page him. He said that I was thumbing my nose at the town, and I'm here to tell you I'm not here to thumb my nose at anybody. I'm just in a desperate situation, and my cows are in a desperate situation. And I just asked for a little leniency until I can get this worked out. And I know what you're thinking, why don't you sell cows? My ex-wife's got a lien on everything I own, and she won't let me do anything. And why don't I do this when I'm broke? You know, it's been very, very, very difficult. And I'm trying to rectify that, trying to get my business back on its feet. And in the meantime, I'm just looking for a little leniency from the town.
We heard what you said, and I'd heard other information that you had moved onto the town property without asking, and that the town has said, hey, you're on our property and you need to move off. And so what you're saying now is that, okay, you are on the town property, and you need to be there for a few more days, or?
Yeah, I mean, you know, if just a little bit of time, here it is raining again. I mean, it's been miserable.
So how much time are we talking realistically?
Maybe the end of the week. You know, if we get the sun like we're supposed to get, their winter paddock will dry out. I can get them off there and get them back over there, and then maybe figure out a way to get them around the area that Vermont Gas dug up last year. Vermont Gas was here for 28 weeks on that farm. They were supposed to be there for 8 weeks. They were there for 28 weeks. And with that and with the fact that along that road, Charlotte Road, all the water drains right into my pasture because the ditches failed, and I can't fix it, apparently. It makes it a swamp, so I can't get them through there. I can't get them on the other side of the farm. I've got some animals over there that they're fine, they're great. But the majority of my herd, probably 150 animals, are in dire straits. So, you know, and I'd like to be selling animals too, but I'm tied up in court with my ex-wife who will not give an inch. So that's the situation that I'm in.
Any,
So you're trying to get where they are now over the
Cross
right-of-way,
Lagoon Road.
over the right-of-way of the Vermont gas line into that other pasture?
I'd like to. I mean, or go around. I'd have to go around. But I mean, it's pretty wet over there. We've got a problem with the Leavenworth Bridge Road down there floods frequently because the bridge is too small. And that's fine. I can deal with that. But then I've got the Charlotte Road that the ditch has blown out there, and it doesn't drain into the tributary anymore. It drains directly into my main pasture. And it happens to be right there where Vermont Gas dug it up. And they disturbed that soil as late as November last year. So it's really, really, really sloppy in there. Water just pours in there 24 hours a day. So, I mean, I'd like to be able to just leave them there for a few more days. And then, you know, if the sun comes out, it dries out pretty good. I can get them back into where they were without too much of an issue. And I can start mowing, I can feed them, and then I can let things dry up a little bit more, and then I can get them back over to the other side where they belong, and they're fine over there.
And you just can't get them over there now because it's too wet, you're saying?
It's just miserable.
It's too wet.
Yeah, yeah.
do you have anything?
Well, what, I wouldn't like to see that 5-acre pasture there. It's close to the river, and, you know, I really wouldn't want to see them on there too long because I don't want the
I don't
grass
either.
to disappear from there. So
Yeah.
I don't know what recourse we have if they stay there longer.
They won't.
And I also wonder about all the hay bales that are on town land as well.
I've got 5 bales. I've got a mountain of plastic there I have to move.
Yeah, I'd like to, that really needs
Yeah,
to get moved.
It does, yeah.
Okay.
And I'd like it to dry out a little bit. I pay by the weight to get rid of it. It's a shame. I mean, I had an extension service lady from UVM come over because I've been reaching out looking for help. You know, how do I remedy the situation? It would be nice if they made plastic out of hemp or something and the net wrap that was digestible, and that way it would be great, but they don't. So you're left with a mountain of plastic, and, you know, I've got to get rid of it. It costs about, I don't know, it's several $100s a ton. And then when it's all full of water because it's wet, it gets really expensive to get out. I mean, I'll get it out by the end of the week.
Well, I think,
But-
you know, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I would say that pasture really, I would like to not see it be used anymore, that I can understand the situation that you're in today, but I think that we really don't want to see that piece of land used as pasture in the future.
And I haven't done that.
Okay.
And I wouldn't have done it without, you know, in a desperate situation. They're threatening me with a criminal violation, and I went and talked to Frank yesterday and Caleb and asked them, you know, which was the less of two evils, the trespassing violation or the Humane Society violation, and they said the Humane Society violation. And Frank brought up a good point that nobody here really knows everything that's going on. They just see the sloppy mess over there and they think that I'm just trouble, and that's not the case. I'm in a very, very difficult situation, caught between the court, the ex-wife, and the weather, and Vermont Gas, and it's been miserable. And I don't intend to use it I had no cows. I've never put cows on there before. You know, I'm just looking to basically, you know, I'm just looking for some leniency from the town.
So I was curious to know on the map here, where are they now? Where are you trying to get them to? Where are they supposed to be? You know, kind of pointing out everything that you're referring to. Is where they are now.
Actually, I think it's this area here.
Okay.
I've talked with Gary, that landowner. I won't
Yeah.
mention any names, but, last time I tried to talk to him, he beat me with a dog toy.
So this area here that you just last pointed to is, okay, so that's where they are now.
I think that's about 6 acres.
That's where they are now. And you're trying to move them to where?
Well, eventually, I wanted to put him in here, but Gary said, no, he won't let me go any further east.
Okay.
Even though I can't use the land that I've leased from him.
Okay, so show me the land you've leased from them.
I leased this area,
Yeah,
I leased this area, this is where the gas line went in,
right,
here, right through the middle of this pasture.
right.
This is where the ditches failed, right here. All the water from here, from the crest to this here, goes right underneath Lagoon Road and drains right through this. You can see it's wet right here.
So you're asking for, to the end of the week to get them to,
I'd like to, well, I can get them back in here by the end of the week.
Okay.
And it'll be dry enough where the Humane Society will be fine with that.
okay,
Once they're back in here, I can start mowing some of these areas and I can start feeding them.
okay. So it's not about moving them,
Eventually, I want to move them back over here, but I have to get them across the road and get them over here and around where they drilled under the river, because it's undisturbed. And then I can get them around over here, and once they're on this side where my other cattle are,
Yeah.
they'll be fine.
and how long before they're on the other side do you suspect?
Well,
That's,
Best case scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue we have is they were moved onto town property without permission, and there's also some material on town property that we want moved. So even if you know, came in here and said, no, I'm not moving at all, we would say, hey, you gotta do this. So you've already said you're willing to move the cows, you know, in a reasonable amount of time, because we couldn't order you to move them tonight, I don't think, that wouldn't work. So we're saying maybe by the end of the week, by the end of Sunday, you know, which gives plenty of time.
Plenty of time.
And also your material, you're
Yeah,
thinking that's
I'll
enough
get the
time?
material out this. I brought the dump truck back from my shop in Essex yesterday. I don't have any intention of leaving it there either. I'd like to have a nice place to put it on the property that I lease, but I don't. Everything is soaking wet.
Right. I mean, I think that seems like it gives you enough time to do the job in a fair way.
Mm-hmm.
It solves the property dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
Does that seem like, from your point of view, Trevor, that would be reasonable?
Yeah, just as long as it's both the cows on the, what is that, the eastern end, and that all the materials are gone, that everything as of Sunday or Friday or whatever date you set,
Yep.
that our property is
Yep.
free of
Absolutely.
And you-
animals and materials and garbage and everything.
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, that would have to be,
I don't think we necessarily need to do anything more on that. I mean, you're okay with that?
I'm fine
It
with
sounds
I
like
just,
this is
I-
something you
I
can
am
work
not
with.
thumbing my nose
That-
at anybody. This is
yeah.
the Humane Society, and Caleb was there one time, and then Anthony was there the next time, and they're very adamant, like, I'm gonna go to jail if I didn't get them off of there. The veterinarian was like, you need to get them off of that paddock right now. I don't care what you do with them. They need to come off right now. I can't get a trailer in there. You know, it's this gas line has been my bane. I didn't get any money out of it. You know, I've got half the farm that I've leased that I can't even use. You know, so I'd appreciate it if, just a little leniency and
I mean,
and
I
I'll clean
think
everything
if
up.
that's okay with the board, I
I'd-
don't know if we need maybe a motion?
yeah, I'd like a motion, just so we've got something to,
I'll make a motion to allow Paul List to keep his cows on town land and the remnants of hay bales until Sunday,
Yeah.
May 21st.
May
May
21st.
21st.
I can get it on sooner than that. I can get the plastic out sooner than that. I just like to let some of the water wick off because I'm paying several $100s a ton at the landfill.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, any more discussion? I think, Paul, from my, and I'm just getting information from different places, you've been a bit confrontational with some people, and I think that the coming here and working through this seems a reasonable a way to do it. And,
That's what I prefer. There's a lot of other factors that you guys don't have time to listen to. It's been a brutal last 5 years of my life.
well, it sounds like we've got, a path moving forward that works for everybody, so.
I appreciate it
yeah.
very much.
Is there,
The materials for remove, just it's the hay bales, the hay bale wrappers, the brick rubble, anything that you put on town property
Yep.
is moved off. I just want to make sure that that part's clear.
okay.
You don't want the stone removed, right? The stone pad there?
The stone pad,
Yeah.
looking back to,
The stone pad there that I had Vermont Gas put, they were going to use that for the road.
I think we'll start with the materials that
Okay.
are there, and we can, if we
Okay.
need to come back and address a stone
Okay.
pad, then we can, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking specifically of the pile
Yeah.
of bricks or other rubble
Perfect.
that
Yeah,
I've
it's
seen.
clean fill. I'm using it to
Yeah.
fill holes.
So you're okay with that?
Absolutely.
All right, and unless there's other discussion, we can vote on the motion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So, good. Hope it works out for you.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
I appreciate it,
Good
folks.
luck with the weather. Next item on the agenda, unless there's other public comment. Replacement of the SCBA's units for the fire department. We had this discussion, I think, at the last meeting or 2 meetings before. A presentation that described taking a loan out for SCBA's, and the loan would cover complete replacement and upgrade. And I think there was a question about potentially using, rather than a loan or complete loan, using some potential reserve balance funds was a question. So Trevor, do you want to tell us sort of what you found and your recommendation?
Yep. So one of the questions that was asked was, we have, at least when you look at the audits for this year, and I'm trying to find the page real quick, unassigned fund balance. Usually we try to keep our rainy day fund, as we know it, at about $250,000. Last couple of fiscal years, we've been just under that threshold. This year, and by this audit year, so the fiscal year concluding June 30, 2016, $394,166 was the amount that was listed in the audits. So we're well north of that figure. So the question was, could we use our own money to essentially loan ourselves the funds with no interest payment? The challenge with using unassigned fund balance with anything that needs to be repaid is there's no clean way to repay it. The unassigned fund balance is essentially what's left on the bottom line. It's the easiest way to think about it. So how do you repay something to a line that doesn't, the money's there, but that line doesn't really exist? So then you're into creating some kind of account, essentially. And one of the things we've talked about a couple times in the capital budgeting process is getting to that point where maybe we do have capital reserves set aside that are sufficient to allow us to move to buying equipment outright, and then either repaying those funds or starting to budget for depreciation, doing some of those things to get ahead of the curve. Still a good idea to get there. That's a few years to get there. So if you do want to use unassigned fund balance for this purpose, the cleanest way is to simply pay the 75 and then try to recoup it as future savings. In that we would be thinking about transferring the $15,000 over. Remember, we had ramped up the capital transfer. That's about the same amount that the amortization schedule from Northfield Savings has us repaying each year. I think it's actually 16 and change, but it's pretty close. So that's where you get it back, as you wouldn't be making that transfer for those units for whatever those years would be, or to make those payments to Northfield Savings Bank. Doesn't necessarily fall back onto the unassigned fund balance, but it does essentially repay that money by not spending it in those future years, and does avoid that interest cost. There are likely other ways. And then it's also, we want to make sure we fully understand that we do have that unassigned fund balance, that we're comfortable with it. We talked about bringing in the auditors to do a report. That may or may not happen until July, was what we were sort of talking about schedule-wise, to bring them in to talk about some of these pieces. A cleaner way to use these funds and avoid interest costs is actually with the highway garage project, because we could spend that money out of the general fund, and then when we get the bond, close on the bond end of July, early August, we can repay ourselves those expenses, so they could theoretically return exactly to those lines. It's not super clean, but that's probably the cleanest way we can make those two pieces work. Still recommend the original plan. It keeps what would be the transfer relatively level. And then the other goal of this is so we get through the 5-year window of paying the 15 or 16,000 a year. If we can hold that for another 5 or another 7 years, what are they, 12-year useful lives?
Yeah, the life.
Yeah, 15. And so if we can hold that for another 5 to 7 years, we've just paid for the next set in cash, hopefully. And that's the other pieces to move us to that spot. And so this mechanism lets us get all the way there eventually. And in return, we pay some interest costs. And that 75 is the not to exceed amount. So we've got capital reserves possibly totaling about 40,000. There's some trade-in value to the old units. And so the number that we end up on could be less. But try to set it at that conservative maximum.
And a 5-year warranty, yeah, when you ask for more than $1,000, you have to have the microphone. So,
It's a 15-year warranty on them, so.
so
They're
pretty
full.
much kind of cover to cover most
Right, cover to
things.
cover, everything other than obviously physical damage. So the ones we have now are out. The other alternative is buying similar to what we have today, and they have a 5-year and a 7-year, depending upon what pieces go bad. So the ones we selected were the 100% warranty, so.
And you're feeling pretty strong, like we
Yeah.
would get 15 years out of them,
Yes.
unless there was an event, which I think you mentioned the
Correct,
last
yeah,
time.
unless it's
always-
physical damage,
Yeah.
so, yeah. And they're local where the other vendor is not local, so it's quite a drastic difference in the two, so.
Go ahead.
So if we had known about this when we were doing the budget, would we have done something different?
We would have, I think we would have done this at that point, and so then the capital budget would have shown the $15,000 we showed transferred out, maybe even ramping up to 25 in one of the out years, would have shown as either 15 or 16,000 and change for that same 5-year period. So the dollar amounts, I don't want to consider them a wash, but we still were looking to put aside
Yeah.
something closer to the 15,000 going forward so that we could speed replacement, and even talked a little bit about going up to 25 or other amounts, and knowing that we might have a year where we'd even go bigger because
Yeah.
it made sense at the time. So it would have changed how we talked about the replacement. I don't know that it would have changed the dollar amounts based on how the amortization schedule came back from
But it
Northfield
seems like it
Savings.
would be good for these items like this to know what the replacement schedule is.
Yep. And we've moved toward that in that capital narrative too, trying to lay out
Yeah.
useful life schedule, so there's that piece. The other, correct me if I'm wrong, Al, but I think some of this idea came from having conversations with colleagues who were in a similar spot, trying to figure out how to replace a number of units, but
Sort
not
of
having.
piecemeal. I mean, that's how it's been. It's
Right.
sort of been piecemeal as they start running out, because you didn't get them all at once in previous times. And I'll give Al some credit the last couple years at budget time. I mean, you've said, hey, we've got SCBA's that are
coming.
that are gonna run out, so, these.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only difference that I can see really between, using the fund balance or the loan is basically the $5,500 interest we're gonna pay over the life of the loan, so. And that really actually is probably the last piece of capital equipment other than the trucks that were in the building, obviously, but, that's the last piece of capital equipment that is hanging out there for a while, so.
And it also gets
Well-
fire almost to that spot where we talked about if we can get to the 15 or 16 and we set it, and then we go for, say, another 5 to 7 years after, we're leveling the capital,
Yep.
We've had
Yeah.
these kinds of cycles.
Yeah.
We're doing that, we're on pace to do that with the trucks too, so that we might be able to replace all of these equipment pieces and all of these vehicles with
Right.
what is relatively the same capital footprint
Yep.
in the next couple of cycles. So there's some advantage, and I think we want to move everybody to that spot. It's just
Right.
we happen to be a little farther ahead.
Yeah, basically because of where we're at now with this last truck, if we stayed at that same payment, it's 18 years flat. you know, it's a level for 18 years, so. And that would cycle through each of the trucks, and so.
Are there any more comments, questions?
I'll make a motion to authorize town staff to seek financing for a period not to exceed 5 years for an amount not to exceed $75,000 for the purpose of replacing the SCBA units for the fire department.
Second.
Any other discussion? I would be curious, so we have some that are pretty old and some that aren't too old, so we'll get some funds.
They're all 2008 when it was Saputo. Yeah,
Okay.
they're all,
Oh, that's right, you had said that, yep. Okay. But it would be good to come back to us and say, here's what we did get for
oh
some
yeah, I'll
trade-in.
let you know, yeah.
And that goes directly to the same company that's providing them, or how do you
Nope,
dispose
no,
of
it's another
those?
company, so it'll come back in as a
And you-
check into the general fund.
Okay, and you had said they tend to go out of country or whatever.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Any
So
more?
how will you know how much to borrow? You'll need to sell them first?
Well, we'll get a commitment
Okay.
before we
Yeah.
do anything, so we know exactly where we're at, so, yeah.
Anything else? We have the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye, and none opposed. The motion is passed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Al.
What's that?
Thank you, Al.
Oh. The next item is the Baldwin Road, Charlotte Road intersection. And this is an initial presentation from Tyler Billingsley. Some time back, we had much discussion about this intersection, a trial period, a lot of comments in several ways on reconfiguring this intersection. And I believe the select board said, let's ask an engineer to take a look at it, look at the condition, the safety issues associated with it, potential improvement ideas if needed. And I think that's what Tyler has done. And
Yes.
so it's primarily, in a way, a presentation to the select board. So we asked for this information, but certainly people in the audience will hear. And if there are specific questions on the design, we'll certainly take those.
Sure.
Anything else, Trevor, to add?
Can I steal your laser pointer? Yeah, pointer.
Maybe Tyler, you might just tell us, who you are and
Yes, I'm Tyler Billingsley. I own East Engineering right here on 116 in town.
the new spot right in
Yep,
town.
the new sign
Yes.
just went up a couple weeks ago, so yeah.
I must have missed the cookie open house that you had.
It's coming.
Oh,
It's
okay.
coming, yeah. So I took a look at this with Trevor and Mike. The first step I usually do on any kind of project like this is to do a site survey to really understand what's out there, the geometry, the drainage, the grades, signage, utilities. So I built a kind of a base map showing the topography and all those different features. And for something like this, where it's an intersection, it has some strange alignments to it. I try to apply the VTrans standards as best you can. So VTrans has standards for things like roads and stop signs and drainage ditches, and they have one specifically called A76, which is for town roads, and they've got an intersection detail. The challenge with using some of VTrans standard details are they work in a perfect situation. So if you have got a new subdivision with perfectly straight roads and they hit in a perfect T, they're very easy to apply. When you have existing roads that have been there for decades, if not centuries, you use your best engineering judgment to try to get those standards and details to fit as best you can within reason. The perfect situation to this would be to basically straighten the road and have a perfectly T intersection. That would cost way more than, Trevor and Mike, we talked about using what's out there within reason to make it better working with what you have. So I applied the A76 detail, and basically what you tried to do is make more of a T intersection, more of a 90 degree. And also get rid of, what happens now, it seems, is a lot of people who are going, turning right off of Baldwin Road, they kind of sort of come to a stop or rolling stop, sometimes here, sometimes there, sometimes they just kind of fly right through. People that are turning left kind of stops, there's no real stop bar, it's just a wide open space. So it seems, the people who drive it every day know how to follow it. The people who have never been down it or don't use it a lot are the ones that seem to kind of get tangled on where to go. So what I tried to do with the A76 detail is basically eliminate that no man's land, which is kind of that triangle-shaped piece out here. So I used the standard details, and you basically match a radius into the existing road so that it transitions on and off from one road to the next easily. Put a stop bar in, so it's a very clear indicator along with a stop sign of where to stop. One thing I had additionally on here is just because it's going to be something new and it's been this way for a long, long time, similar to what the highway department did before with their test layout, is to put in some reflectors to make it very clear to people where the new geometry is going, so they kind of get used to that travel pattern, that path over and over again. So it's hard to see on here. I can maybe try to zoom in a little bit. So what I tried to do is I did the survey when the old delineators, the old reflectors were out there, and you can see just barely these kind of gray squares.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So I grayed them out because they're gone, but I left them on there so that you can kind of see what it was with those test delineators versus what it will be.
That's helpful.
The idea is very similar to what the road crew did before, trying to straighten it out, trying to narrow it down so you don't have people everywhere. I would say the main difference between mine is the old delineators kind of came up and then did a 90-degree angle over. Mine is a little bit more of a radius to it, which
yeah.
exactly. And the VTrans standard detailed is a minimum of R30, a radius of 30. I bumped it to 40 just to make it a little bit more comfortable for people coming off, and especially for some, the bigger farm equipment and trucks. They have a little harder time with the 30 versus something like 40. So I tried to make it generously wide. Besides the edge of pavement, there's a shoulder, and the drainage would essentially stay the same. The ditches on both sides are fine. Another item I changed a little bit was the VTrans standard intersection detail likes to have a flat spot as you come to the intersection for obvious reasons. If it's icy or whatever, you don't want that intersection basically teeing in an angle or on a slope. So what I did, which it does right now, not bad, but you can make it a little bit better. So what I did is dropped the grade down just a hair as you're coming into it to try to make that, I think they have it less than 3% is what they want in their detail. So it's right at, or a little bit less than 3% for that first 30 feet or so. So it gives that nice kind of stop pad. You regrade up a little bit, so it's a little bit more of a hill on the south side. But that is all within reason. It's not going to be, it's a pretty smooth transition. It's not a hiccup to get down to that flat spot. So that's the general gist of it. It's a pretty simple layout. I tried to keep it simple because, like I said, you can get crazy with these things trying to make them fit the standards exactly, and it'd be very expensive to try to go way outside of the existing limits. So that's a Cliff Notes version, if that's what you were looking for.
The advantage of this versus doing nothing.
Yeah, I think it makes it better, but like I said, it doesn't make it perfect. It's still called a flawed intersection. It's still going to have challenges. You're going to do this work, and it's not, because you already have the layout there, it's not a very expensive project to implement. It will make it safer, I think. It won't make it as safe as if you were doing a complete from scratch, two perfect roads coming together. It won't make it that. To make it that, you would have to spend tenfold of what you would spend on this, if not more. So I think it is better. It's not perfect. I think there's a lot of people who've driven it for decades and decades and decades, and it might take some getting used to. For people who've done it every day, I think once people got used to it, it would be second nature. And it will kind of tighten things up. So it's more so for that that right-hand turn lane off of Baldwin onto Charlotte, or the left to a lesser degree, but it will make that better, less rolling stops, hopefully less, no stops at all, just keep on going. So I think it will improve it. It won't make it perfect.
Okay. Mike, do you want to add anything to this, or?
How far was I off?
Mike was pretty close. You can see his delineators there and my delineators there, so that's probably off by 5 or 6 feet. But the same general alignment, the same T idea. The idea is there, it was just a little bit of fine tuning to make it match as close as possible, close as feasible to the V-Trans standard detail.
So, Mike, the assumption, I think, is that you'd like us to, move this forward, this project. Do you want to just briefly describe, what advantages, for the town and the road crew and all that?
I mean, there'd be the safety issues that Tyler's pointed out. A lot easier maintenance for us, for the highway department. Plowing, we plow that whole intersection now, and now it's just a matter of going in and coming out, like we do any other road. It'd save us a lot of time. And then with the paving going up, extending a little bit further, if not to the top of the hill, it would help out a lot with the summer maintenance with the washboard and everything else.
So I think right now the pavement line kind of disappears because it dives into the gravel road, but it's somewhere right in there, maybe just across from the barn. But like Mike said, if you could extend that kind of to the crest of the hill, that might make long-term maintenance much easier if you have the money to do that much paving. Obviously with this, it's a very tight, small area, so it's not a ton. If you do that long stretch, it will increase the cost, but long-term maintenance will probably go down significantly.
Okay. So I don't think there's any plan to make any decisions tonight, but Mike, just to get an understanding, if we were to move forward, what's the timing, besides maybe you'd like it tomorrow, but I'm guessing if this was to move forward, if it was, you'd want to tie this into paving that you would normally do for the town.
We're hoping mid-August, late August.
Okay, so that just gives us an idea on sort of timing. Are there any questions by the board?
Would you change the line striping in the middle so people know where they should be turning off of Charlotte Road onto, don't you usually have a gap in the yellow? Yeah.
You're talking about the gap on Charlotte Road.
There wouldn't be a gap?
There's a gap there now, I believe.
Okay.
What I have right here this is the fog line, the white line, which ties into the fog line, which kind of starts getting faint as you get closer to Charlotte Road.
Yeah.
Or, I'm sorry, Baldwin Road. So I've got a fog line tying in there, a fog line on the other side that kind of follows the radius out, and then back there, a double yellow line here, which would stop at the stop bar. I don't have anything right now touching Charlotte Road, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, that's what well, not touching it, but on Charlotte Road. Don't you usually mark on Charlotte Road where you're supposed to make the turn? A break in the yellow
yes.
line.
And that's there now. It's just, I believe it's there now.
And it wouldn't change then?
No.
Okay.
I think it's fairly wide right now. We
Okay.
could tighten it up. I think.
Tighten up, right.
Okay.
Yeah, we could tighten it up to have it extend a little bit further so it's not such a wide sweep.
Okay. Well, I just wondered if there was going to be a change based on changing the intersection, whether that double yellow line, the gap in it would need to change.
Tighter. I can look at that.
Okay.
Where do we, so the money that we had in addition from Vermont Gas, I'll say, that's still part of the equation if we choose to pave to the top of the hill? And if we waited till August?
Covering to the top of the hill, though.
No, but we had extra paving money left over, right, that would get us there?
We had some paving reserves
Right.
coming out of fiscal 16, that we used some of them in fiscal, whichever the next year is, fiscal 18. We used some of them there, but not all of them. We left some based on that earlier estimate. So it'd be a combination of paving reserves, Vermont Gas's contribution, and have to see where the bids ended up if they were still close.
So one other question, has Chief Koss or anybody's reviewed this, do we know? And or maybe not?
This is the initial presentation, so.
Okay, so not,
Mike
all
and
right.
Renee and I and Tyler are the ones who've seen it to this point, and now everyone here. And
Yeah, we got a kind of a draft,
Yeah.
review stamp on it, not for construction, knowing that there might be comments, changes, tweaks.
Okay.
So once those are made, I'll remove that and it can be good to
All right.
run.
Does the board have any more questions specific to this?
Well, it does go back to the origin of doing this, is that it isn't a high accident location, and, it appears to be an unsafe intersection, but in reality, it doesn't function that way. So the question is, are we making a solution to a problem that doesn't really exist?
Well, other than Mike saying maintenance problems, and
Okay.
we have heard complaints of people not stopping, I think.
Yeah, and I know a couple of people stopped when I was out there surveying and looking at it and saying that, hey, we've never had a problem with this intersection, or very few problems. And I'm sure there's numbers for that from the police. The things that probably aren't caught, which I don't know how many are the near misses, where someone goes to blow through and then realize there's someone barreling down the hill and they jam the brakes on, someone swerves and nothing happens, but it really could have. I don't know what the near miss count is out there. I don't drive it every day. I'm sure the people who are out there have seen more than I have.
All right. Are there any questions to Tyler? You have to use the microphone.
Pat Maynard. I have two questions for you, Tyler. If a vehicle was stopped at the stop bar and a truck and a hay wagon or a truck and a horse trailer was coming from the east to the west and wanted to turn onto Baldwin Road, would that be kind of tight? Would they have a tendency to need to make a couple of swoops, or could they make that turn without nicking the car at the stop line?
They should be able to make the turn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And my second question is, what's the price tag for this?
That is very dependent on how far, like Mike was saying, you can pave from here. Or right now the pavement basically stops there. It's kind of gravel over it here. But if you do this piece of it, that small box area, is a very different price than if you do this plus, I believe it's got to be 1,000 feet to the top of the hill anyway.
What would be the
800 feet to the top of the hill. So if you're doing 800 feet of paving versus this is maybe, maybe 100 feet of paving, it's
So what's the price for the less, not so much paving?
I haven't done the cost takeoff. I can break it down though. It should be fairly easy to break down from unit costs. I can put that together.
Okay. And my question for the board is how much money do you have set aside for this? And then why would you want to spend it to solve a problem that barely exists? That's my question.
Mike, is it fair to say it would be your road crew that would do all the work but the paving?
Yes, except for the
Go ahead.
I think the maintenance issues, I want to be careful to separate the two pieces. The maintenance issues are there now. So that's a problem we'd be fixing with that piece that does exist. I think there's a question about, do we have an unsafe intersection or not based on, does the absence of data prove or disprove that? And so I think they're two separate questions when we talk about fixing problems.
I think mine might just want to go up that much in the winter.
Are there any more questions for Tyler? Yes, Al?
I was just going to mention that, I think with all the delineation that'll be added, it helps because typically where the fire department ends up going is the ones coming down the hill, and they just don't, not off Baldwin Road, but down the Charlotte Road. And I think the extra delineation will certainly help because, there are some signs there now. Typically they get hit when they go across through there. So, there is a safety issue. It's not so much the Baldwin Road side of it, but coming down the hill. So I think the extra delineation will help on that part of it for sure.
Just to be clear, the delineators that I have on here are basically stop when they transition to. I don't have anything going up or west on Charlotte Road.
Yeah.
I can look at that, but that's not part of this right now.
Yeah, I would say that would be a good addition to it because it, I mean, that's the kind of a blind spot and a lot of people don't realize where they're headed when they come down over there, so.
Any more questions for Tyler? Yes?
Hi, I'm Sue Johnson, live on the Baldwin Road. You guys all know me. I was one of the people against it before. I want to remind Tyler that we have proven that it's not a dangerous intersection. I did the research with the police in Shelburne and Hinesburg, and it's not. There's been one accident, and it had to do with a truck and a bicyclist that was drafting a truck, and when the guy went to pull in, he didn't see the bicyclist hit the truck. That's the one accident in, was it 16 years, 11 years? It's all been slide-offs. I'm like Pat, I'm concerned that it's still gonna, that you guys are gonna create a problem by changing this. You know, if it has to be changed, I would like to see it not so severely changed, because I can see the little markers, the little square markers where on the east side that I felt was pretty tight, those little squares on the east side of the road are pretty tight, and now that's going to be, I'm assuming that the shoulder is dirt, or is that going to be paved?
I would leave the shoulder, I would leave it asphalt shoulder, and then transition the space, that kind of triangular space in there. Right now it calls out removing that pavement and topsoil seeding and mulching it, that no man's land in there. And I'm moving that, this is the large arrow pointing to the left as you're coming down the hill. That would be moved up here.
So there's still going to be a lot of shoulder that people have room to use.
Yeah, so this is the shoulder right here. This is the fog line, the white fog line.
Right.
These are the new yellow reflectors here, and I believe that's 4 or 5 feet. So you've got
the old ones are almost the same.
Right, so the old one's right there. You can see where they match up almost identically. Right there is almost identical, right there is almost identical. There they start separating a little bit. There's probably a 3-foot separation. That stop sign that was there was basically one of the delineators. That is the biggest separation, so it's probably, at that choke point, is probably 5 feet wider.
And how wide will that whole skirt be, and where it connects to the Charlotte Road, and what is it now, and how much different will it be compared to the road? Because I've been noticing, our road is really quite wide.
It's very wide.
And
actually,
the whole road is wide, so
Yep.
if the whole road is wide, I would think that the skirt has to be wider than the road,
right.
especially on that corner.
That's a good question. The VTrans standard lane width is 12 feet, so from that point out to the fog line is 12 feet. Then the additional 4 to 5 foot shoulder is, you're talking about 16 or 17 feet on each side. So that's 32 to 34 feet from from edge of shoulder to edge of shoulder. Right now, this is the existing edge of, I'm not sure where you want to measure it to, but it's probably an additional, it's probably 50 to 60 feet wide. Now, if you were to measure, you're measuring at an angle, but that I would guess is an additional 15 feet onto what I have.
Will there be more warnings on this before anything moves, or are you as a select board determined to pass this no matter what public comment says? And that goes to the select board.
No, this is just an informational meeting, so we would have another meeting to discuss this and get public comment.
So will all of
Certainly.
the comment from before, I think there were lots and lots and lots before, those will still be considered now? We won't have to write all the letters again?
I don't think so, but if you had it, we could bring them all up again and put them in a packet.
I would
they're
encourage that.
they'd all be in the previous agendas, so we certainly could pull those out.
And then I know there's a lot of letters that weren't with people that just sent letters to Trevor or to Mike or different, there's been a lot of letters sent in regards to this intersection, and hopefully that'll all be, that you as select board will consider that.
I'm looking at the select board. I think we're all saying yes.
And then my other comment is, the thing about people not stopping at the stop sign. I know I personally have sent letters to the police. I've spoken to the police because before you said that was one of the big issues, that people didn't stop. I've asked the police to come and stop. Or to give tickets. I'm not sure they have. They've not even responded to my emails about it. And I think that the nature of that corner, I've been on that road over 40 years, and first there was nothing, then there was a yield sign, now there's a stop sign, and I think people will always roll through that stop, no matter what you do, unless a policeman sits there every day, people will go through that, because if you're coming from the Charlotte Road, from the Hinesburg, the Baldwin Road, looking west and no one's coming over the hill, people don't stop. I mean, that's just human nature. And I understand in the morning, I've spoken to people that ride on that road coming from Charlotte and say, yeah, people pull out in front of them all the time. And I wish that the police would sit there and give tickets to those people. And I think if they did it enough, maybe people would stop more during at least rush hours. So anyway, those are my comments.
Are there any other comments on this particular design? Yes?
As far as enforcement at the intersection, there is nowhere to sit to do enforcement. And if I sit in a marked cruiser at the intersection on the shoulder, everyone is going to stop at the stop sign. So if someone wants to make a little place for me to put a cruiser off to the side of the road where it can't be seen when you come down that hill, we'd be happy to do enforcement, but right now it's pointless. There is a break on the east side there. I don't know whose property that is. Is that maybe Carr's property right there? There is a break, but I believe there's barbed wire across it. It would be a good spot, but we'd have to work with the property owner to see if, you know, Mike could dump a load of gravel right there so I didn't bury something in the mud. You'd see me? There's not enough bushes right there? Well, so that's why we can't do enforcement there. There's nowhere to sit, and you'll catch somebody every now and then if you're driving through there at the exact moment that they, blow through the sign. But, most people can tell what a police cruiser is from pretty far away. So.
All right, are there any other comments? Well, thank you, Tyler. And we haven't scheduled a follow-up, but there will be a follow-up.
Yeah, just let me know if there's questions. In the meantime, I can address them ahead of time, maybe.
Okay.
Come prepared.
Sounds good. I could, yeah, right. No, that's okay.
Thanks. I thought so.
The next item is, item 8 is the discussion on the paving projects, but before that, I was waiting for Tom to get here just to sort of announce that we've, moving forward, Renee has accepted the interim town administrator position for the interim as we seek a new hire for a town administrator. And we're very fortunate that Trevor has agreed to stay on part-time for a period of time. No specific time frame, but for a period of time, like a couple days a week, to support ongoing projects under the direction of Renee. And so I think we had discussed what we were going to do, and we talked about a short term, like we've got to, have support in the town administrator position. So I think we're in good shape now. We've had some discussions about offloading some other tasks that get done now within that department, either to other departments or perhaps outside of the town, to really ensure. One of the things we wanted to make sure is the interim town administrator doesn't get so overloaded with everyday details that we can't move forward on more important or strategic items. So thank you very much, Renee, and Trevor. We're happy that you're going to help us through this transition period for a while anyways.
thought Travis was the one who said yes.
Yeah, yeah. Don't say that, because the more that's said, the more mistakes I say. So, so that's all good news, I think. And while we're on that topic, we continue to look for people who are interested in working on the committee to interview and help in the selection process of a new town administrator. So we're looking for, we have a couple members on the board who are willing to be that. We're looking for town employees, any town employee who has an interest in this, and then town citizens too. So, and we hope perhaps by the next meeting, we'll be able to get that committee sort of off and running. I think to send an email into the town, into Renee, would be the best collection point. But certainly if somebody preferred to contact the select board member, they could do that, but we would probably float their information through the town administrator office. Any comments or questions about that? So I think, yeah, this is the best transition we can, I think, have hoped for. So, so the next item is discussion on the fiscal year 18 paving projects. And do you want to lead us off on this? And Mike, you might have to come up to the witness stand.
Come on down. So, I think it was 2 weeks ago we'd mentioned that we had heard we were receiving a Class 2 paving grant from the state. That's all now official. We're still waiting for the official word on the structures grant we mentioned, but we anticipate that one will come. But tonight is focused more on talking about how that Class 2 grant fits in with our paving plan for fiscal year 18. Some of the thoughts Mike has had. If you'll recall from our paving plan, we were hoping to do, we split some of the longer roads into at least 2 phases. So Hollow Road was the next one up. It was supposed to be phase 1 is the one in fiscal year 18, with phase 2 to follow, and then possibly, depending on length, size, cost, you know, to moving to the next road in that plan. So the Class 2 paving grant allows us to take those funds. They're intended to be supplemental in terms of they go on top of the paving you were planning to do. They're not replacement funds. And so I think Mike can talk a little more about how we would plan. There's a match. So we'd put $225 aside, $225,000 in our capital plan. It's a max $200,000 grant, right, for the Class 2? 175, okay. So we'd match that 20%, so $35,000 of our funds go to match that. And so that leaves us with 195 roughly. 190, I'm sorry. What about 190 left?
We have a total of 400 though.
Gives a total of 400.
Yeah, if you
right?
put the 175 on top, you can think of it as 400 as well. Yeah, with 225 being local and 175 being state funds. So I don't know if you want to talk about what the provisional plan is, at least at this point.
To go ahead and anticipate we're going to use the 400, which would allow us to do the last half mile of Hinesburg Hollow, 3/10 of a mile of, or only 3/10 of a mile of Tyler Bridge Road, the half a mile of CVU Road, and 1,200 feet on Mechanicsville Road. What, to Commerce Street, yep. Yep,
So all of CVU Road or just from the intersection?
all of CVU Road,
The whole thing?
yep. And all with a 2-inch overlay. So hopefully grant, and because it ends up being, I put it out as just over 6,100 tons of asphalt. Hopefully numbers will be low like they were last year. I don't think they'll be as low, but, I mean, we paid 57 a ton last year. I'm hoping 61 this year.
And if we don't, which project would fall out?
Well, Hinesburg Hollow has to get done because
Right.
of the grant.
Yes, so
we'll
which one
just work
won't?
backwards. Mechanicsville, CVU Road will start falling off where Tyler Bridge. And the thing is, the The last half mile of Hinesburg Hollow and Tyler Bridge, those are way out of town for our contract, the companies we deal with in Chittenden County. So the price goes up. If we tell them we need to come back next year and do a half a mile of Hinesburg Hollow, that's, the other end of town, the furthest part of town.
So it's just the last half mile of Hinesburg Hollow?
The Hinesburg Hollow is 2.8 miles.
Can't we pay Huntington to do that last half mile when
No,
they?
because it's Starksboro.
Oh,
It goes Hinesburg, Starksboro, Huntington. We already did that when we did Tyler Bridge Road.
right,
Right.
yeah. Okay.
I like the plan. The roads you pointed out, I've noticed
Okay,
personally.
but the thing, well, what happened was, is because last week's meeting screwed me up, thinking the next meeting was next Monday. I put out the bid to be due 4 o'clock next Monday. So you're not having another meeting now until June 8th. So asking that when we get the bids, that we take our best bid between, I guess, Renee and I now, and Trevor, and award it next Monday night.
And this is very early that we're getting these bids.
They wanted me to, they tried to get me to do it last month, but
Well,
I
that's
wasn't,
good.
I didn't want to do it because we didn't know about the grant.
Yeah,
So,
Okay.
makes sense to wait to know.
yeah.
I mean, it gets us getting caught up.
Good plan.
So we're
Would-
just,
So potentially, this, if we were to move forward with the Baldwin Road, you would tie that in to,
Right, and I figured, I mean, if we get a low bid of 61 a ton, that's what I've heard other towns have been getting around us. The total, what I proposed was, 372,000. So it'll still leave us, just shy of $30,000.
We should have about, if everything in 17 holds, the way we projected, and we did capital reserves, there's another 20 to 25 in capital reserves from this year that's in that pool to be used either for Baldwin Road or rolled forward to the next year. So there's the potential for some additional funds to be on the bottom line still or to cover if costs go goofy on us in an unexpected way.
and, correct me, and the Lot 1 little roadway there, there's no plan to pave at this point.
That'll be bid out as part of the whole project. And so the idea would be to pave it as sort of the completion of that project.
Not out of
But not
highway
as a
funds.
piece of
Right.
this, no, not at this
Okay.
time. Yep.
but it doesn't need to be paved?
It doesn't need to be paved, so the way we've
Doesn't.
talked about
Right.
structuring that is, call out the paving price and make it almost an ad alternate kind of a thing. And if we can do it all in one shot, we'll do it. But if we needed to come back, plan, needs to be there, needs to provide the parking, it doesn't need to be paved though.
So I guess my question was, you weren't planning to tie that into
No.
this? Okay.
Yeah, long way to say no.
Yeah, that's all right.
So I'll make a motion, Phil.
All right.
I'll make a motion, the select board provisionally approve the paving plan as presented.
Second?
Do we have it in writing? Can we put it
Yeah.
in the minutes, what it is?
The plan?
Do you want to add that to the motion?
Yeah.
Just as
Yeah.
Mike said it to you, okay.
And since we've,
Yeah. So Olive
Two,
Hollow
okay.
Road.
All right,
All
we're
right,
getting
I'll-
it here. Yeah.
All right, correct me if I
Yeah,
get
it's
a
right
number
here.
wrong, Mike. Olive Hollow Road, half mile of CVU Road, yeah, half inch, that won't, that'll do a lot. Half mile of CVU Road, quarter mile of Tyler Bridge, which is all the paving that we've got on Tyler Bridge, and then 1,200 feet of Mechanicsville, and that's the section from 116 to Commerce?
Commerce Street.
Yep. So we'll put that right in the motion, if that works for me.
Fine.
Any other comments or questions? And so the timing, again, how would this work?
So we bid it
For-
out, award the bids. paving
Award the
would be
bids, and
done.
then, it'd be mid to late August that they pave, hopefully before school starts.
They tell you, they decide that.
Well, yeah, a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I tell them, and they laugh and tell me,
Yeah.
and...
and then it'll
yeah.
get line painted sometime in November?
Yeah, no, I think they're on it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be good to follow up. And they would sort of mobilize once and move around.
Right. Once they come in, they should be able to go through and do it
Yeah.
all.
Okay. Any more questions? So we have the motion, it defines the roads. I think we have an understanding that if the bid comes higher than expected or the costs are higher, probably the Hollow Road will definitely be done, Tyler Bridge Road would be done, and either CVU or Mechanicsville could drop out a little bit. Okay? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye, and none opposed? Thank you, Mike. And you get to stay in the seat. The next item is discussion and possible action on the loader replacement. You want to discuss this one?
We would like to replace our loader. It's been in the capital plan discussion process for a while. We've tried out 2 of them.
2 of them, yep.
They didn't let me drive either one, so I can't personally attest to how they handle, but I'm assured they both did well, but there is a preference. Mike can give you more of the details in terms of where we got them.
Yep, we tried the John Deere out and the Volvo, and we currently have a Volvo, but it was flip a coin between the guys, it didn't matter which one, and it sort of boiled down to the numbers, and being a $10,000 difference, they want to stay with the Volvo, being $10,000 less. So, we'd like to go with the Volvo, but with the Volvo, what we'd like to add, because of the savings between that and the capital money for the truck, because we save, what, 52,000 by keeping the old equipment off the truck, allow to purchase a broom for the loader. Put a sweeper on there. I'm sick of using the one we have had for 30 years and modifying it, and so,
What does the broom go on now?
the tractor,
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And this broom would go on
the loader.
the loader?
Yep.
And you take the bucket off and you,
Yeah, we have forks for the loader, so the
Oh,
bucket,
okay.
it's a quick attach bucket,
okay.
so. Put a broom on there, but then the price of the broom is $15,500. So it's a 9-foot broom, 9 or 10-foot, big broom, but we could do more sweeping quicker. It's a lot easier, I mean, it takes a half a day to put the broom on we have now on the tractor, and it ties the tractor up. And, we should be getting ready now to start mowing, and we should be out doing the sweeping, so.
Can you just sort of describe what sweeping, you do? What is it?
Typically in the spring, we do all the intersections, especially on the gravel roads, some of the bridges and stuff, and then that's it. But we do it once a year, that's it, because it's too time consuming to have to switch everything over. This way here, it's just a guy flips the switch, switches it, connects a couple of hoses, and we can go out for half a day and sweep some intersections with the loader, and gets around a lot easier, a lot quicker, so.
So you can sweep more?
We could sweep more, yeah.
Yeah, same thing.
What?
So you could come to my house if you want to sweep.
So it ends up, the total price on the loader and the sweeper would be $142,475.
It seems a little off to making this purchase in the, like that it wasn't in the capital.
It is.
Point.
Oh, the sweeper's not.
The sweepers,
right.
yeah, the broom isn't, yeah. But it's in the budget. We've got the money in the budget, so.
You could consider it and implement too.
Yeah, it's part of the
Right.
loader. Do you have new blades on the front of the bucket?
On the front of on the grader?
No, on the bucket of the loader.
New blades?
Not the blades, but the edge on the bucket.
Well, it's a new loader, yeah,
Yeah.
brand new.
Well, I just didn't know if the bucket has a,
Yeah, it has, yeah, they have replaceable cutting edge, yeah.
okay,
Yeah, that usually 2 or 3 years we replace.
okay.
Is there a motion?
Sure, I move that the Select Board authorize the highway foreman and the town administrator's office to proceed with the replacement of the loader and sweeper per the adopted capital improvement plan and budget.
Second it.
Okay, is there any more discussion? You need a building for this thing? Need a building for it?
No.
Any-
Other than I'm signing hours over tomorrow morning, so.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Aye. None opposed?
Guess my only
Motion's
question
passed.
is how soon before we could take delivery? When do you expect it,
What?
the loader?
It's in our shop. It's been there for 2 weeks.
Try them out first.
We would try 'em
and then
out
you-
first.
Right, but I thought, so you get to, got it,
We've already had it.
got it.
We still have ours.
I thought it was like a try it out elsewhere kind of.
No,
No, it's
no.
bring it here.
Try it out here.
Bring it out here.
For as long
There's
as
my-
you possibly can,
Right,
like a
There's
month.
my answer.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike.
So, and then did we do the truck already? We did the body, right? We did the
Come
truck.
back, yeah.
Okay, I should sign that.
We, this was the replacement of the 2013 International that has been problematic, shall we say.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were able to recycle some of the pieces, I guess you could
Everything.
think of, yeah. And so it's the,
Script. We have to pick it up tomorrow, so.
Mm-hmm.
And then just wait for the new one to come in August.
yeah, we did that early April, March, somewhere in there. We did that a while back, I think.
Yeah.
I thought
We're
so.
Mm-hmm.
good there. Yep,
I think so, yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah.
that's
Well
it.
done.
Thanks, Mike.
All right.
We'll see you next Monday for the meeting.
All right, next item on the agenda, number 10. Proposed changes to the animal control ordinance, and I'll let you go, Trevor. So there was a new drop in your Dropbox, and maybe you can explain what happened there, or
Yeah.
what we're looking at, I
I
guess.
gave you the original draft version from back in January. There's an updated version that's in Dropbox. This is meant to be an initial discussion. Caleb is here to take you through what is in this proposed draft. I'm gonna make him come on down next as our next contestant on this particular game. And so going back a little bit to town meeting, if you remember, we sought voter authorization to, through our ordinance process, be able to better, there were kind of two pieces about, one was the on-premises versus off-premises with a dog attack that we were looking to specifically target. And then part of that was also allowing the town to initiate the action, because the way it is under statute right now is you'd have to have it'd be an attack off the premises of the owner initiated by the victim, essentially. This would allow us to say, if it's on the premises and we have enough reason, we think under our ordinance to proceed, we could initiate the action too. So we're part of those town meeting changes, but how they fit with the ordinance draft that's in front of you, Caleb could probably.
So those are the two things we added, that it isn't only off premises, and also apparently we don't need a particular citizen to complain. The police could take action
Yes.
based on things they've observed and
In the old
responded
one,
to.
you couldn't, there was no process for starting an investigation or taking any enforcement unless you had a complainant or a victim. That, I believe they actually had to do a written
Yeah.
report before we could even start doing anything. So if nobody wanted to complain, you had dogs that would just continue to bite people.
We had this very issue in 15, I think it was, with a dog that twice on
Yeah.
premises,
With no complaint.
but no complaint. So we essentially sat there and had to wait until, unfortunately, there was an off premises and a complaint combination.
And the other one you were talking about was, I don't know if you covered it or not, the Condo and Homeowners Association.
That one I did not cover.
Yeah.
So that is in, I noticed it in the older version that we had. It is in this one too? The new version?
What was the older version and the newer version? Did he send you the version without the red?
Yeah.
Yes.
No red lines, yeah.
The only difference between the older version and the newer version, I believe, is that he just highlighted the changes so that they could be seen earlier, easier.
Yeah, so
So-
there was a particular change or addition that sort of said jointly owned.
Yeah, it's including common property owned by a homeowners association or condos association.
Where is that, in what section?
That's on page 1 in Article 3E.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed that, too.
So this is where it gets tricky with my understanding of grammar. But, so does it mean that if it's on common property, that is at large, or it's not?
I believe is what they're saying, that is at large.
Okay.
So there's a difference between your dog running around your own yard and your dog running around the condo association.
Right, so if the dog is running around the condo association, the police can take action?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
So Article 5, running at large, no person shall permit or cause any dog to go at large within the town of Hinesburg. All dogs using a town sidewalk, recreation, or bicycle path. Does this include the town trails, like in the town forest and in Japrags Park?
It does, I think.
Because it's been an issue that we discussed a lot on the Conservation Commission, and it's a big issue for the Trails Committee about dogs being off-leash. It's very common. So is this now not allowed?
That's how I would read it. I mean, if you're
think
going to
that's
say
great.
within the town of Hinesburg on recreational or bike path, the trails of the town forest would be.
And this isn't a change. This has been,
Yeah, this is,
This
Been
is,
there
This
all
is
along.
part of the original one, I
Yeah.
believe, if it wasn't in red on the copy you were given. So.
So there's some terms of art here. If the intent is to have legally established trails be part of the on-leash requirement, it would be worth adding that language to that, just to make sure that the full clarity is there. And then if there is an intent to say legally established trails you are allowed to have a dog off leash, then to maybe add a statement. So I guess the question is, how do you feel about that as a policy choice? And then we can write it either way to make sure it's fully clear, because I think you can read it.
Both ways.
We want to make sure that we eliminate any ambiguity, is what I'm driving at. And we can write it either way. It's what's the policy preference?
One thing that came up when we talked about this in the Conservation Commission was it's very difficult to enforce. It's really in the habit body of people, not just in Hinesburg, but other towns as well, to bring their dogs to Japrags and just let them run. So if it was a policy that they be on leash, who would enforce that?
I think the only ones that enforce anything is going to be
Yeah.
us, but,
I would guess it would start with
That's going to be difficult to enforce, to be going out. I mean, it's not like we're going to be able to go out into the town forest and find people who have their dog off leash, but Japrags is one thing.
I mean, typically it would come with a complaint,
Yes.
I would think.
Yeah.
I mean, don't want to get myself in trouble, but something like this typically is, tends to be enforced when there is a violation, a serious issue. The fact that if we were, this has been in place and people do that today, let their dogs run loose, and probably 98% of the time it's not been a problem. But when there is a problem, it's here, and you could call the police and say, this is an altercation I've had, and, whoever owns that dog will be responsible for not following the ordinance.
I think it erodes a rule to have it be one that people don't follow. So that's why when I was on the Conservation Commission, we said on leash or under voice command, because we figured everybody could more or less follow that. But I think it's really something to consider, and I think it might be a good idea to have it be that in the town of Hinesburg, all dogs need to be on the leash, but it will be a big change. And if we do decide that, then we need to decide that we're going to make it happen.
There are the two pieces of the enforcement. One is the more difficult one that you're talking about in terms of you need to, somebody has to be on site, witness the violation, issue the citation at the moment. Those will probably be rarer. It's really more about the tool of once we have notice of an attack, it gives us another enforcement avenue to pursue if we have a hearing. It's one of the things we can find someone in violation of and retroactively enforce in some way through the penalty process. It's imperfect, but it at least does draw that link between action and consequence. And so it has value there, but it would be incredibly difficult to enforce without a full-time presence in every park. But
I mean, if you want to pay me to go hiking in the town forest, I'm okay with that. No, I think that definitely needs to be clarified in there too, as far as if we're going to be considering this, town forest and Caprags and stuff like that as part of that or not.
And you may, as a larger policy, consider, some towns go so far as this is an off-leash park and everything else is on-leash, or these are the off-leash areas, or these are the off-leash times. I mean, there are those different, depending on how you want to try to, off-leash periods or during, weekdays during these hours when it's less likely to create some conflict with other users.
I do know a lot of people feel very strongly about this one way and the other, so if we, seems like we would need to get public comment on this.
Well, you can describe what the process would be, even if we thought it was ready to go today. What's the process to move forward?
We'd want to have a meeting at which you'd formally adopt it. We'd want to hold a public hearing. There are some notice requirements. There's that 60-day effective window at which someone can petition up through 45 days from date of action to force a vote to repeal whatever action is taken, all before it's even live and enforceable. So there's some process steps, so it's certainly not, even if you said we want to do it today, there's still a bit of road to walk. And then one of the other things to consider with this particular, if this seems like this is the thornier of the policy questions, split it out, have it as a separate conversation, and in this round really get at that on-premise, off-premise, because that's where we have had a problem, and we know that we could use, that change, if implemented, is something we could use if we found ourselves, hopefully we never have to use it, but so also consider splitting the two pieces out if it looks like one's going to be a little trickier.
I mean, there's a change to the ordinance that, as Trevor said, we're trying to, move forward because our hands have been tied in a situation that was dangerous and unsafe. So we're trying to move forward at that, but now we sort of uncover the squishy pieces of, that in fact you could read this that says, hey, all your dogs have to be on a 6-foot leash. And, I think it certainly would be worthwhile to explore how to find common ground between people who, can have voice control for their dog and, want to go somewhere where they can run free, and then, others that may have their dog on a leash and don't want it to be threatened or, want to bring their kids and run around. And so that's a pretty sticky problem. And, thinking the way Trevor is, maybe we look at it in two pieces and we find a process to work forward on the squishy piece. And we've had discussions about a dog park, which, helps that situation a little bit. I mean, so there are some ways we can work on that squishy piece. Have you, and let me just ask, have you had a lot of animal complaints about dogs that are loose in the forest or the park or whatnot?
No. We've had a few that I've heard, but our main issue is the on-premise, off-premise, and dealing with that.
Lenore, did you want to, I mean, you're shaking your head, so.
The Trails Committee gets lots of comments about this, and I don't know if you want to go into that now. It sounds like you're talking about splitting the changes to the ordinance maybe into two pieces, but we hear from people who are very hesitant to take their kids or they themselves to go onto the trails because that they may encounter a dog that's off leash, and they've had a bad experience in the past, and are afraid of having another bad experience. We hear a lot of those kinds of comments. When we had it on our agenda several months ago, then we heard the opposite side of that, of people who really enjoy and feel their dogs enjoy having that off-leash experience. And, my dog is under voice control and it doesn't poop on the trail, it only poops, So you hear both sides very passionately. And so we kind of feel torn about how to go forward with it. And some of the ideas are to have, you could say dogs have to be on leash on the trails. I don't think that would make a lot of people unhappy, I think. One idea we talked about was having a section of the trails be dog-free or dog on leash, and Japrag seemed like a likely one to try, perhaps, because of its conservation and education mission. Maybe you don't want dogs running free there anyway. Plus, it's not connected to any of the other trails, so it's kind of a closed set of trails in that sense. And as you mentioned, there was discussion in the past about a dog park. I don't know what's happened to that idea. It seems like it's kind of gone away. I could envision having a section of Japrags be the dog park and a section being dog-free, but that's really a Conservation Commission issue, they have to be a big part of that discussion. So we hear the whole spectrum, and I think by requiring the 6-foot leash on sidewalks, that's going to at least provide an area for those people who are concerned about dogs that are out of control. That provides a place for them to walk. It doesn't really provide a natural area, wooded area. But yes, we hear both sides, all sides of that.
Yes, Marilee.
I wonder if this could be amended, go at large within the town of Hinesburg, that the town of Hinesburg be defined as the concentrated population area, the village area that does have defined boundaries, that the sidewalks, and you wouldn't want dogs running free there anyway. And this issue of dogs running on the trails, I do not think is going to be decided easily.
Well, no, I agree. I mean, just talking about it, it feels like one option for the board could be to move forward with the language change, because our police department and the board has sat through several pretty serious issues of safety, and that addresses that, and perhaps we encourage a committee of maybe trails, maybe conservation, maybe a couple citizens, someone from the town or legal side, to sort of work at, what are the possibilities? And what you're saying is one possibility, that we really define the town where leashes are absolutely required, and leave some flexibility, or we assign certain areas where it's known that you can run your dog, and that's a possible solution too. So I think it would be pretty difficult for us to work through that and this in a timely manner. We've got, the town has voted to move forward with this ordinance change, so it feels like we should probably do that. But maybe this time not kick the other problem underneath the rug, but consider committee activity that might help, further define what the rules are around leash dogs and recreating dogs. Any other thoughts on this? Yes, Michael?
Hi, so the discussion tonight is about the changes, not, there is a current leash law, right?
Mm-hmm, that's right, yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
And this has been side railed because of the leash law, the changes to this currently.
It's not been, no, it just sort of gets, it's in the ordinance, and so you sort of uncover, this is exactly what it says.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we
yeah.
get focused on the changes, because that's the important part.
Yep,
Yeah,
I
okay.
agree, yeah, I think, that's my position too, and I'm not sure about the board, but any thoughts on that? So the suggestion is to move forward with these changes, and the other, addressing the very squishy topic on, can I run my dog free when I'm running in the town field or town forest is one we probably shouldn't hide it, but it's a much longer problem to address. But I think we should consider moving forward. Does that sound reasonable to you? Oh. One more?
Phil, I'm sorry that I got here late. I'm not used to your being on schedule. So I don't know if you've already talked about the dog waste portion of the ordinance.
No, we didn't, and there weren't any specific changes in that.
Well, the Trails
Go
Committee
ahead.
had sent a memo
Okay.
requesting that you add one word to Part B under Article 8, where it says, "The owner of every dog shall be responsible for the removal and proper disposal of any solid waste excrement deposited by his or her animals on public walks, recreation areas, or public or private property." It goes on. We would just like to see the word trails added after public walks, comma, trails, comma, go on. That's another thing that we are hearing a lot about is the dog waste on the trails, on the sidewalks, bags left on the sidewalks. And it sounds like you don't want to get into that whole discussion tonight. I kind of wonder how we'll deal with it.
Well,
But I would like to at least have that word trails added.
It feels like we could probably make that addition if the board is saying, now's the time where we can, modify the wording and clarify something like that.
But if you're going to come back at a future date and talk more about dog control, the leash, where, when, all that, could that future discussion also include dealing with dog waste? Because we hear just as many comments about that as the dog on leash, off leash business.
But, I see the board sort of nodding
We'll
that.
just make
Yeah,
that change
we can
right
make that
now.
change now.
Yeah, but if you could make the trails one, I'd love to see that.
Yeah,
But then
yeah.
there's that whole, Section C under Article 8, I just sort of wonder what we can do about collecting or not collecting. But I think that's a longer discussion for another day, and maybe could be paired with the on-leash, off-leash discussion.
Yep. So I think we'll go ahead and add that to the proposed change. Any other comments? So again, the timing on this would be, we would get we'd have the sort of latest changes in there. And then the next step would be adoption to move forward by the select board with a motion.
Well, yeah. I'm just actually reading C, and it kind of, does that obligate us to have our own municipal refuse collector?
Specify on site.
Because I wouldn't want to see us,
Yeah, I don't read
there
that
being
in
the
there.
expectation that we're going to be putting trash cans out so people can put their, okay.
Yeah, I don't see it saying that that's
Okay.
got to be provided. It just is appropriately disposed of and. So what would the board like to do?
So come back on for June 8th with the on-premise off initiation of action and dog waste changes, and maybe pull the rest of it and set it aside, just so you know
Yep.
what the other proposed changes were, and then you
think so.
can
So
split.
that will be the first of the public hearing
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, try to take that, yeah, that next step would be June 8th, and then see where the calendar takes us.
It might be good to have if possible, have it highlighted exactly what's been changed.
Yep.
Otherwise, we'll be going into all the verbiage of the other parts. Is that okay with everybody? Yep. All right. Any other comments? The next item is number 11. Thank you. The delinquent tax sale. And Trevor, it's not that complicated, but it is complicated in some ways.
Not so much for tonight, maybe. I said maybe not that complicated tonight.
Okay.
Basically, two things, just to have you approve hiring Cohen, Rath, Dannon, et al. To be the attorney that will run the tax sale, which we had done last summer, but then we never had the tax sale last summer. So we just a technicality that we have to do it again. And then secondly, just to appoint somebody on the board who you could authorize to bid. I think that's pretty much standard procedure to do that, so that if a situation does arise where the town wants to bid on something, that we have a person who's authorized to do that. So those are the two things I wanted to accomplish tonight.
And, I mean, could you describe, or Trevor describe sort of how the money sort of flows in this process, or doesn't?
In terms of which part of it?
So we have taxes that are owed to us.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, the way a tax sale works is the town recoups assuming somebody bids on whatever property you put up for tax sale, the town then gets the tax money, the attorneys get their fees, and, you know, that we hold whatever excess there is in escrow for a year. So, for example, if somebody bid $10,000 over what was owed to the town, that $10,000 would go into an escrow, interest-bearing escrow account. And if the property owner redeems the property in the one-year redemption period, the person who bid on the property gets that money back, plus the taxpayer has to pay interest to them on it. In the situation, there is one particular situation that we discussed last year when I was here, where we do have one taxpayer. It's a mobile home that has 14 years now, I believe, of delinquent taxes. We've put it up for tax sale twice, and nobody has bid on it. I've also gone to small claims court and gotten a judgment order that had no impact either. And
You got the judgment, but it didn't work.
right. So that's the instance where, you know, I'm considering potentially having the town bid on the property. We would then be essentially putting money aside to pay ourselves.
And take care of the issue.
Right,
ultimately.
and take care of the issue, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't cost the town anything other than the legal fees, and, you know, essentially, we wouldn't, it wipes the books clean. And then I do have sort of a verbal agreement at this point with the owner of the park to then take possession of the home and either remove it or,
Put it on the tax roll.
yeah.
Do we actually have to bid the minimal amount which covers the taxes and the legal fees? So that would be the minimal amount we would bid. And then there is no expectation we would actually then sell it if nobody else bid.
You could sell it at the end of the redemption period once we took possession of it.
So it still goes through the 1 year period, and the trailer would, in this case, the mobile home would stay in the same spot
Right.
for that
yeah.
time. And
The
would
way-
somebody be living in it?
Yeah, I
during
mean,
that time?
with any tax sale, during the 1 year redemption period, the taxpayer or the owner of the property retains use of the property, and they get to reside in it. You know, they still own it during that period. And that gives them a grace period essentially of a year to,
Maybe come up with the funds?
yeah,
or maybe
So
not.
it's not an
Right.
abandoned,
No,
oh, okay,
but, no, it's not abandoned.
okay. Because then sometimes, then we do have to pay to dispose of it.
Well, that's why I had a discussion with the
Yeah.
park owner,
Yeah.
because I specifically said we don't want to be in that position.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah,
And you're feeling like we won't be in that position.
no.
There'll be a test next week on this. Well,
All
it's
right,
too
I'll make
bad,
a-
but, go ahead.
I'll make a motion that the select board engage Cone, Rath, Dannon, Lynch, and Scharf to administer a delinquent tax sale and to appoint a select board member as the authorized agent to provide a bid on behalf of the town.
Okay, so we have the motion and a second. Do we have a select board volunteer who wants to attend it's not scheduled yet?
No,
When will it be?
it'll be probably in mid-July, because there are pretty lengthy requirements for public notice for these kinds of things.
Tends to be during the day sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have any of us done that before?
No, I don't know. Have you ever done it? No. I don't think I've ever seen it done. Yeah.
I mean, I think it would be really pretty straightforward, because the attorney would say, this is the minimum bid.
Yeah.
You would say, I so bid, and then...
And only if we needed to. bid.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless somebody else wants to do, would you like to do
I'll
it?
do it.
Okay, yeah. All right. And does anybody else like to do it? Okay.
Do we want to add that part of the motion?
Yeah, we might add that, maybe a friendly amendment.
To appoint Andrea as the authorized agent.
And who seconded it? You seconded, so you're okay with that change? Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? None, so motion passed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Missy.
Okay.
Maybe we'll do this and then take the break, huh? 9 o'clock break? Yeah? Is that okay? You don't, would you like to take a break now? Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the continued review of the town plan, Chapter 6. We've started a new little policy. When we have late meetings, we're going to have just a 5-minute break. So the time is, I don't know, we'll start at 25 of 9, so about 7 minutes.
Sounds good.
All right, is that okay with you, Alex? Okay. Yeah, 7th inning stretch. Any, check the score, maybe? I think we're all set. We're back to order, and we're on item, are we all set?
VCAM already?
Good, all right. So we're back to the discussion of the town plan, Chapter 6, Community Facilities. Do you want to just describe the chapter very briefly?
You were scheduled to talk about Chapter 5, Natural Resources, and Chapter 6, and it took longer, so we just did Chapter 5. So tonight, we have Chapter 6 on the agenda, Community Facilities and Services, which I believe several of you said you had suggested changes on, so that's good to talk about. So we can dive right into that. Trevor and I talked about scheduling. I don't know if you've talked to Phil about that. Okay, so I'll...
A little bit, but it would be worth it to...
For the full board and the chair who's working on in future agendas, Trevor and I discussed, since this meeting was so full, and it being quite unlikely that we'd be able to get back on schedule with the town plan and cover 3 chapters tonight to make up, that we just acknowledge that we need to push this forward, meaning that the hope to have a public hearing on this on your second June meeting, June 22nd, just isn't going to work at this point. So we would need to push that into July, which is a little unfortunate. It's better to have public hearings not in the middle of the summer because people are a little more plugged in when kids are in school and all that. But it's not the end of the world. There's been quite a lot of public feedback, and I think if we do the right public outreach, those people that are interested will still have an opportunity to email comments or come into a hearing. So with that said, Chapter 6. What do you have questions about, or what would you like to see revised?
I had one comment, and Renee and I think Trevor might come in. And this first section where it talks about the, municipal services and whatnot, would we consider an action associated with, at one time we had Rocky here, who was in charge of all the town facilities, and now it falls into the town administrator primarily, which is, I think, a challenge to sort of keep track of all the buildings. And so now, you have the police kind of trying to do a good job of take care of their building, and, everybody's sort of got these town property, and, maybe some goal where there's a central place where, this comes out of, and not necessarily fall on the town administrator. And so that, when it comes time to painting, we paint. When it comes time to sort of coming up with a capital plan, it isn't individual departments, it's the town sort of working on that. Renee, do you have any comments on that?
Actually, that is a change that we've sort of made into the utilities department, which is sort of a utilities/facilities. So right now, we're kind of working in coordination with them, but it's something that's a direction that we talked about as we changed when we had that transition from buildings and facilities to utilities.
So, go ahead.
I don't see mentioned anything about the town hall building in here. I mean, we talk, and it seems like we should.
Do you mean in terms of an action item or just a general narrative description of the building?
I think both, maybe a narrative description and a recognition of just action of like, keep an eye on office space. I mean, in terms of whether we have enough office space.
Okay, so evaluate necessary office space for general town services?
Keep it, I mean, we should keep it on the radar. I mean,
What about just a list of all the town-owned facilities in one place?
Yeah.
I mean, we have a thing about, property that's conserved, there's a list of that. Maybe a list of just, these are all the town properties. That might be helpful, and this is the place it would be.
the other thing that I saw that was missing was the cemeteries. There's no mention of cemeteries. And
And you can kind of tease it out, but it's not as specific, I think, is what you're asking for.
I think we should have it in community
Yeah.
facilities and services. We should have a
Yeah.
list
Yeah.
in here of,
What those are.
yeah.
Because it's extensive when you start to add it all
So
up, I think.
that sounds like a good idea to me. And I think I know what portion of Chapter 6 to put it in the narrative. It's not an action item, it's a list. How far down the line do you want to go with that? My thought was buildings and maybe land. You're not talking about also equipment, are you?
No, not
That's a
capital
separate
equipment,
thing that we
no.
should have, though.
No, but, I think as small as like the pump station at the cemetery, that I think would qualify, because that's a building that has to be maintained.
Okay.
Yeah, not a shed, 10, I think it's 10 by 10, right? Would be the official rule on anything more than 10 by 10. How about that, Alex, huh?
Right, per the zoning, got it.
We can pull quite a bit of that from our insurance documents, actually. We have to do lists, so putting the building thing we might be able to get away with a copy and cut and paste kind of a thing for most of it. The land piece, we might have to work a little bit more to tease out.
Well, he already has the land.
We already have the land piece? All right, even better.
So Renee, were you agreeing with me on the thought that somewhere in the action that it just sort of says we have, you know, a sort of coordinated oversight and maintenance and of,
Yeah, I was just simply providing you the information that we do. I mean, that was discussed as we left the buildings and facilities model and went to utilities, which is sort of a utilities/facilities department. And so I think that's where there's going to be, you know, keeping up all of the facilities in town. Right now, there's more coordination between the town administrator's office and utilities department. But I think that was kind of the idea, is switching that over to that department. Is that correct?
But let's acknowledge it then.
yeah, I was just sort of suggesting that could be an action as, you know, that we continue to work to have a, you know, oversight of everything as one big piece.
So, Phil, I'm trying to hone that into something that is specific. And if the board is still of the same mind in terms of the transition that happened when Rocky left, as Renee described, if you're of the same mind today as you were then, do you want that action item to be specific to the utilities department, that capacity be built or be developed in the utilities department to oversee all town buildings and provide a central way to do that? You know, be specific to the recommendation being within that department?
Yeah, I think, you know, ensuring we have the sort of wherewithal to do that in a central place, I think makes sense. Does that seem?
More to the point, that's the direction that we're moving, or if not moving, actually practicing at this point.
I think Alex is asking, though, where is he going to put it? Is he going to put it
Yeah.
in the action items under water and wastewater?
Oh, I can put it in I can find the
General
right section to put it in. I'm just trying to get clarity on what you wanted to say, and I'm also pushing you a little bit to be more specific about what you're talking about, because capacity and
yeah.
central, to me, that if you talk about it's happening in a department, then what you're really talking about is adding staff.
Or, at wherewithal, right?
Yeah.
Budgeting it and putting those responsibilities within that, you know, making sure it's very clear that that's how that works. Michael?
It almost sounds like you're changing the role of the town administrator by adding people into that, underneath that person's, by creating a space, by saying that you're planning to add positions, rather than allowing the town administrator to evolve their part of the job for the town, their duties of the town.
Yeah, no, I don't think I'm saying that. I mean, I think Renee's saying we're moving in that direction, but I mean, you know, if we looked at job descriptions right now, as anybody other than the town administrator is probably generally responsible for everything, but, you know, ideally, somebody who is, you know, I don't know, annually looking at all the buildings and making sure that, you know, that there's a plan to replace the roof in 10 years and this, you know, so just sort of putting that all together, it doesn't, I'm not saying where it has to happen, but it should happen, and I think it's you know, could be done in a more
So maybe it's just what we want to do as the action item is
Clarify.
Develop well, I don't think we want to say it's a staff, develop a facilities capital plan for maintenance and capital for maintaining town facilities
Maintaining and for future needs.
and future needs.
Pretty general.
And so then it is under the town administrators, and you can decide who's doing it, but I think we want to recognize that it needs to be being done.
The capital plan does envision evolving, I mean, we are moving this way to include some of these building needs in there. And we have started to, in the budget, to add extra capacity in the general fund budget for some of the facility stuff, for the work that's being done for what are normally the utilities crews, so expanding their uses. A perfect example are the safety kick plates on the steps out front, identifying a need, proposing solutions, working across departments, getting it done, getting them installed. And so that all does fit in there. So I think some of it's just continuing to develop some of the documents that are already in place, or continuing it with some of these plans. And so we do have some of these elements out there. I missed the first part, so I apologize if you're
Well, just
looking
that
for
we
something
did-
more specific.
But I think the first part, Trevor,
Yeah.
was there's some concern that the town administrator has too many items on their plate, maybe I was reading into that, and that managing all of our facilities used to be a Rocky Martin function, and that now is a town administrator function for a job there's too much to do. And so Renee was saying, well, that's been transitioned to the utilities department. And so that's where the conversation sort of started. In my estimation, we have good crew in the utilities department, if that's what we're calling them now. I wasn't aware that we had changed the name. But I don't know that anyone over there is thinking at a higher level about maintaining our buildings over the long term. There's staff there that seems very good at dealing with a very specific project, and like, we need kick plates, let's go buy those and measure them out and install them. But as for how this building is going to get maintained long-term, or, sidewalks, it'd be nice to see that capacity somewhere in that department, or in the town administrator's office if there was capacity to do it.
I just want everybody to be clear, these aren't things that have fallen away and need to be revived. These are things that weren't there. So it is part of that process of creating these things. I just want to specify that piece too.
And continue to build that capacity for.
So I'm going to just repeat what I'm trying to write as an action item. Develop a plan for the long-term maintenance of municipal buildings and ensure there's capacity within the utilities department and/or the town administrator's office to accomplish that.
Why wouldn't it be broader to? Yeah.
Or just ensure there's capacity within the organization to plan for those needs.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
it's very general.
Sorry to do this again. One of the things that, this discussion that I came tonight to talk about was there's a lot of discussion about capital planning and things like that, but we don't really talk about capital funding. And I think that's what slows us down with some of these things. So like in chapter 5, we talked about funding the conservation fund, and several of you were open to that. We're using tax money. Maybe we should have an action item, a goal of a capital fund, and using tax money to fund that. So that would be a suggestion of mine.
I mean, it's almost as part of that, sort of what you're saying is that there's which we're working on, but, that capital improvements and needs are planned and clearly identified and appropriately funded, something like that.
Well, if you, like the land conservation fund, you actually put IE tax money, why don't you just say that too?
Well, that would be implied, that it's tax money.
Well, I'm trying to make it as strong as the land
Yeah.
conservation fund, that's all.
Well, doesn't a budget include costs and,
Capital.
funding, a budget includes the income and expenses, right?
In some of it, one of the things we've talked about on and off is, to maybe try to distill it, we've talked about whether or not a capital tax rate, borrowing from some of the larger municipalities is a mechanism. I think that's we're all talking about the same thing, but that might be, you know, funding mechanisms for this plan, and then maybe saying, i.e., capital tax rate. We're talking about tools that are in use in other places. And we have some models already on hand, Colchester and Essex, for example.
So if I used an EG parenthetical statement at the end of this action item, you're going to give me a few of those I can put in the EG?
If that's what I'm hearing from all of you, then yes, we can work that out. But if that's not what you're intending, then,
All right. I mean,
like I said, I crashed that conversation kind of late, so I apologize.
I think that would be okay to put in, to
Yeah,
consider.
it seems logical. Develop a plan for the long-term maintenance of municipal buildings and ensure there's capacity within the organization to accomplish that plan while ensuring those needs are adequately funded. And then, for example, capital improvement, whatever that list is that you have. I don't have it, so.
Does that seem, Renee, that seem?
Yeah. Is buildings too restrictive before someone mentions sidewalks? That's not a building.
I mean, it could be a general statement of, yeah, yeah, infrastructure, something pretty general.
Okay.
All right, I have one.
Go ahead.
613, I'm kind of surprised that's not a top priority. It's kind of mentioned,
6.1.3 on page 67 is what Tom's referring to. And there is a reason for that, Tom. There is a top priority action item that's more general than that.
Yeah,
That
that's
has to do with municipal infrastructure. So if you look at page 7, if you can flip between 67 and 7, where is it here? Right, it's the 5th bullet, provide facilities and services to support commercial industrial development, municipal water and sewer, roads, sidewalks. I think that the planning commission felt like that covered all the bases, although it is sort of specific to commercial industrial. But in any case, we have more than just those wells that we need to deal with. It's the sewer system as well, and certain road improvements and the like. But anyways, that was the rationale. If you would like
Well, you could just add
6.1.3
maybe
to
631 to that bullet.
add the reference, yeah, that's actually easy to do if everyone's agreeable.
Do we talk about this on the bottom of page 68? It's talking future tense, but now it's a done thing. We had the vote. We're doing it.
Oh, right, so
town
update
Yeah.
the town garage discussion
I
to
don't know
be
if we mentioned that already or not.
we're doing this section by section, so I appreciate the reminder. I did not have a note to update that particular section.
Easy enough.
Yep, thank you.
You also might want to reference where you got that on page 68, where it says, the parcel contains the town's gravel pit with estimated capacity to meet the sand and gravel needs until 2030. Where's that information coming from?
The last town plan had the same
Yeah.
language, so I don't know where it
I
came
don't know,
from.
but I think we should try to find out where that has
Especially
come
if
from.
we use sand more or less, since that number has
I don't
been-
know. I
So
mean, I
I'll-
think there was a UVM geology class at some point that did some study, but it might be worth.
So I'll ask Mike, he's the only one who would know,
We
right?
could ask Mike, or we should take it out and we should say that that's something that we need to do.
Right.
'Cause I don't think it makes sense.
Because you don't trust it, as
Well,
just a statement without
it's-
attribution.
right, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's fine. We wouldn't want to do it again just for the sake of doing it again. We would do it again because we don't trust the statement from the previous plan.
Right.
Without knowing where it came from.
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe Mike can, was, I'm sure, part of the plan, and, maybe has an understanding of it and has an idea on how we're consuming it.
Right.
Right, so if we can't find the study, but he has his own estimate that's based on borings and whatever else happens, I can just swap that out.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
you can look at
Let's-
it when we review all these changes.
I think I might have an idea where it came from. I was researching something else, I don't remember what, but I came across this 1970 court case where the town of Hinesburg had a gravel pit. And,
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we
And
know.
Yeah.
adjacent to it was the other one that was being impacted because the town of Hinesburg was selling sand and gravel, like 80% of what they were producing was for profit. And I think at that time, the decision was that if the town didn't sell it for profit and just used it for itself, there was enough in there for the next 30 or 40 years. I think that might be where that came from.
You think it was the UVM study?
I don't know, but I think whether it was the UVM study or whether it was from the court case, I think an action item should be, let's
Yeah, that
get a
is an
stud-
important thing
Let's find out.
because-
Let's do something to know. If it's
all unclear.
If it's unclear, and, I mean, we know that it might cost a lot of money to actually do that assessment, but we could ask a geology class. I mean, I think there's the possibility of getting a little bit more up-to-date information.
Got it. What else do you all have for changes or questions? Chapter 6.
Well, I think we should just make a mention of cemeteries in town.
I want to say that it's in here somewhere, but I'm not sure exactly where, and I know I
me?
did not get any feedback from the cemetery commissioners, so I'll just make a note, Andrea,
Okay.
to add a mention of it.
Yeah.
And then if I find it, I'll
Just at
highlight
least.
that, and if I don't, I'll add it. What you're looking for in particular is
It might be under culture.
just an enumeration of the fact that we have town-owned cemeteries and maybe a list of them if we have.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that the town report contains a list of non-taxable parcels or cemeteries that I could pull from, so. I will work on that.
The other thing is, when you're talking about the schools, you're talking about the, I'm sorry, I'm flipping around here. The population of the school and the number of employees. Let's see, on page 79, the right-hand column with nearly 900 employees. But I don't think all those 900 employees are in Hinesburg.
Right, this is referring to the newly merged school
Yeah.
district.
So, but the fact that CVU is the largest employer in town might be good to reference it someplace. And
I think that's referenced in the economic
in the
development
economic,
chapter.
I thought I
yeah.
remembered that, yeah.
There's a table there of our largest employers.
Yep. And also that section, maybe you want to change the tenses in that one, since it has happened.
Yeah.
So the organizational structure is changing, or changed. That paragraph, I don't know.
I think it still reads right. I mean,
Okay.
this was written after the vote, so that's why, at least I think it was. Let me check. I'll
Okay.
just circle it and
Yeah.
make the changes, Andrea, because yeah, if it's got the wrong tenses, I can fix that.
Yeah.
It hasn't come into existence yet, so there is a certain amount of
Yeah.
transition that's still happening, at least until July 1.
Oh, yes, yes, I am, sorry.
Before you get too far ahead, I had a comment on page 69.
the left-hand column. The second full paragraph, it talks about possibly converting some gravel roads to paved roads, and the sentence reads, comprehensive cost benefit analyses need to be done to fully understand the financial, environmental, and rural character ramifications of paving gravel roads. I'd just like to add and consider the recreational values. That's part of rural character, but I think it's a consideration that's is important. It might be hard to quantify, but there's real recreational value to this unpaved roads, and I'd suggest including it in that sentence.
I think that seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay, I will add it. I'm sure you have more, but if you don't, I have something to bring to your attention.
On page 68, where we're talking about the roads, I was wondering whether it made sense to put something in there about the number of miles of private roads there are in town, even though we're talking about town roads. It'd be, I think, an interesting.
So on the page 68,
Yeah.
the right-hand column, about the middle of that first paragraph, it says, data on the total mileage of private roads is not generally available, but a rough estimate is 30.5 miles.
Oh, right. But didn't we just got another update on that from
We
regional
did?
planning. I forwarded it to you, but I think 30 sounds about right. Sorry.
Okay.
So would that include driveways too, or
No. Just
access
named
roads
roads.
too? Yeah. Alex, did you say you had something to
I did.
suggest to
So
us?
one item was on page 70, second column, the right-hand column, third paragraph in the right-hand column on page 70, talks about the all hazards mitigation plan, and the last one being adopted in 2011. Did you already adopt one?
Didn't we just do that?
Or was that the?
Yeah.
There's the LOEP, right? The
That's the
local
one we
operations.
just did.
That's different from the all hazards
Right.
mitigation plan, I believe.
Yeah.
So you haven't done the all hazard mitigations plan yet, but it's maybe later this year.
How often do we have to do that, Al? Do you know?
Not sure. It has to do with the granting. You have to have that hazard mitigation plan in place.
Well, I talked with the Regional
yeah.
Planning Commission. They're the ones helping us with that, and I know they're working on it so that we could adopt it this year. I was just asking if you'd already done it. So you haven't, so that's okay. We're good. Then the other one was on page 73. In the right-hand column, there's a table there that talks about the upgrade options for the wastewater treatment facility. I put this together based on the draft Aldrich and Elliott report. I think we have new information since then. There were also some question marks in here that I don't know if, I know that Trevor brought them to Aldrich and Elliott's attention as wanting the report to be updated, but I don't know if they ever were in terms of O&M costs. So you guys probably have a better handle on that than I do at this point, or if Trevor does, or Eric, I can just work with them, but I just thought that if there was anything that jumped out at you on this table, you know, as wrong or needing to be added, let me know, and then I can work with the appropriate staff to do that.
We can look back at the report as it was presented, see if we can tease it out of that, and if not, follow up to fill in those O&M numbers.
Okay, so I'll just
I just can't
circle
recall
it.
if they're in there or not. I'd have to look. Well, then, the final one that we received, though, that everybody got a copy of back in January, February, somewhere in there.
Okay, very good. That's all I had.
I've got one here that I just noticed, 646 on page 75. It says, whenever paved roads are resurfaced or reconstructed, include appropriate accommodations for pedestrians and cyclists such as sidewalks, bike lanes, or widened shoulders. It's a nice goal, but I don't necessarily think that's going to happen whenever a paved road is resurfaced. I mean, we do the line striping, which is, I believe, is an accommodation, but
Right, so this is both a discussed item by the Trails Committee and the Planning Commission, and also pays homage to the state statute on the
roads.
complete streets
Yeah.
legislation. With that said, I think we should be honest about it, and I think you're right. In the last several years, I think it's come up during a lot of your discussions of road paving, but very little has happened other than lane striping to the minimum traveled, lane. So maybe this should be tempered, or maybe you all should make a stronger commitment to achieving this action item. And we could discuss what the time horizon might want to be for that. This could be an action item that you are going to commit to, and it's going to be, in the medium or long term, because you can't do it over the next few years. But up to you how you want to handle it, Tom, if you want to water it down and be honest about how we're currently operating, or be aspirational and do something a little different.
I think you could just get whenever out of there would be a help. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
just to
it's
say
not-
when.
It's just not feasible, I mean, to widen every road.
Yeah, maybe it could say when appropriate, or when feasible.
Consider.
Or something like that.
Consider, yes. Right.
Yeah.
Legislation uses consider making those accommodations.
It says consider it, so.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, so maybe we could just look at what it says in complete streets and match that as a minimum.
Just reference complete streets.
Yeah.
Also, isn't that kind of redundant with 6.4.5? I mean, not completely, but there's an awful lot of overlap, seems to me, there.
The intent, Lenore, in 645 is to call out those particular paved roads that connect the village to the rural parts of town.
Right.
As opposed to, say, the Hollow Road, which is a paved road that doesn't serve that purpose, but still, should have some accommodation for non-vehicular users. But we would be paying more attention, for example, to the Charlotte Road or Shelburne Falls Road.
Phil?
Sorry.
Phil, could I make another suggestion on same page, 75, number 6.4.6? It seems to me we have two actions there. One, the one we were just talking about, and then the second sentence, work with landowners to explore mechanisms for making private unpaved road, blah, blah, blah. It seems to me that's a completely different action.
So
Yes.
So just
potentially,
separate it out.
potentially take the first part of 646 and incorporate it into 645, make,
I don't know about that, but it seems to me the 646, the way it's written, has two actions embedded
Yeah.
in it.
What would you like? Because I see what you're saying, Phil, because Lenore mentioned the redundancy. I
Yeah.
could do what you just suggested, is meld 645 and that first sentence of 646 into one action item under 645, and leave the second sentence in 646 on its own.
that seems reasonable.
Okay if I take a shot at that?
Merrily?
I think it was just last summer that it seemed like once a week there was a bicycle death in Vermont. Maybe it was 2 summers ago, but there have been an inordinate number of people who have died riding bicycles on the road. That has not stopped people from riding bicycles. It's something that people want to do, and it's something that is really good to do. So I really would hope that we would not water something down. I would hope that we would really do all we can to make it safer to ride bikes on the roads in Hinesburg.
So I think changing those two you know, combining part of 646 into 645 makes it probably a, you know, clear action.
Yep.
And then the other piece of the, you know, continue to explore the landowners is also another one.
Okay,
Mi- yeah.
I think I got that.
Okay. Michael? Oh, you gotta get the,
There you go, cluster.
yeah.
Cluster development.
So, I got a few things, actually. On 6.1.6. No, I'm at 6.1.5.
What page is that?
On 67. 67. When you talk about the official map, is there a process that defines the future facilities? Because I actually had the cemetery question along with Andrea. Is there a process that defines how to identify future needs for land on the official map?
Yeah, actually, the Planning Commission is doing that right now. They've had the last 3 meetings discussing that, and it happens at the Planning Commission level with community input through that process, and then it comes up to the Select Board once there's a proposal from the Planning Commission. The last time we made the official map, we did a little bit of community surveying, and we brought a speaker in to talk about the official map because it was new to us then. This time around, I think it'll largely be through Planning Commission meetings followed by public outreach on their thoughts.
All right, so that was 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, I think
Over 10.
it was 2009 that we adopted the official map, but I think we did the work on it in 2008-ish. So
I'm just thinking Hannaford's has been 10 years, and we just started it, so. Okay, and when you talk about recreation, it's all about outdoor facilities, and there's no discussion about indoor recreation facilities? So I was wondering, and then as I read this chapter, just a general statement, we talk a lot about a healthy community, and I was wondering how healthy and town climate, I didn't really pick that up in the goals of that when I was reading this chapter, or bits of this chapter, trying to understand. You know, we always talk about a walking community and a healthy community and climate to be supportive. And when I read about the child care section, I thought to myself, that's not really maybe I was looking for something more. When I was trying to get some thoughts, I was wondering your thoughts about that. Be supportive. An example I can give you in my mind is at the state level, the state provides 10 hours of child care for every toddler below the age of something. But the point being is a lot of families can't get their toddlers to the free daycare. So is there a way to support that? I don't know if that's a goal, but that's just an example of a town supporting a healthier community. And that's I think this chapter would be for that.
The recreation one?
Anywhere in the chapter, I just didn't pick it up, a feeling of developing a healthy community, being supportive of families. I just didn't feel we were really talking about that. And that's a pretty general statement. It puts you on the spot, but that's a thought that I have, and you know.
So, Mike, are you suggesting an action item, for example, to the extent that would say something like work to support a healthy community that, I'm using the same word, that supports children and families?
Sure. I would just like to acknowledge that we need to be supportive of our families, and you know, thinking the best example is the one I just gave you, and I don't want to repeat it before you all, but so something like that, Alex, would be fine. I just want to acknowledge that we're trying to create a centered community and have people stay in town to grow.
mean, would that, since that's sort of a very general piece, would it go into the sort of general
Or maybe you
government?
can kick it back to the planning commission and talk about this thought process.
Okay.
I mean, we have whole chapters about land conservation, which I agree with, and things like that, but we don't really talk about the family structures and being supportive of that. And that's an important thing to me. And I'm not even sure one sentence can do it.
Yeah, so we derive the structure of the plan both from, what the community feels is important and also what the statutory sort of requirements are for issues to be addressed. The reason that childcare is in this plan, to be perfectly honest, is because the state requires it. I don't think that the Planning Commission feels entirely educated and expert in that arena, but it's required, so it's in there. I'm not aware that there's a statutory requirement to talk about the status of families in terms of single-parent households or two-parent households, but we could, if it was an important thing to talk about at the community level and to have actions that we would actually work on. But aside from sort of a general statement, I'm not sure, I'm not sure that I can wordsmith that. I think it would have to be discussed at greater length, by the Planning Commission or some other committee that could provide some ideas on that front.
Marilee, do you have?
I see something fitting in under Goal 6.6, ensure adequate opportunities exist for the creation and maintenance of childcare infrastructure. Is that what you were envisioning, Michael, that there be an action added to that?
That's a pretty simplistic statement to me, but yes, it is. We talked about elderly. I want to talk about the general population. How do we know that we have a good population in the structure? I mean, how do we know that we're doing, what we can to reduce the drug problem in our town? Or how do we know that we're doing what we can to be supportive of increasing I know we just had 10 new firefighters who finished firefighter school. Those are the things that we need to be supportive of our community and the climate of our community and be supportive of our families.
So maybe this is a broader theme
It is.
altogether, and you're thinking maybe, at least when I hear you talking about it, I'm thinking about healthy communities as they relate to designing community infrastructure, healthy communities as it relates to initiatives by our town health officer or by fire staff, like you just said, or facilities, or supporting local farmers and the infrastructure for local food. There's a lot of different ways you can go with this as a broader topic as opposed to a specific, maybe it's a guiding principle as opposed to a goal specific as a number. Is that what you're getting at?
The simplistic one to me is Kinney Drugs. Having a drive-up window at Kinney Drugs. If you're a family, if you're a parent, a mother with 2 young toddlers and you need a prescription, it's a lot easier to drive up to the window and get that prescription filled than it is to go in and get it.
So
that's a very simple one.
That's like a lifestyle kind of a thing too.
Well, have you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get my head around what you're
So the Regional Planning Commission,
What's
in
close
their
by?
last update of the ECOS plan, did do a fair amount
Yeah.
of work trying to integrate
what I
both
was-
data and recommendations from the Department of Health and other agencies that work on those sorts of broad community health metrics that
Yeah.
a lot of what Mike is talking about, not drive-up windows, but other things, drug use in particular, and it's true that this plan doesn't go there so much. It deals with a little bit of poverty measures and in the housing section.
Yep.
Deals a little bit with childcare in the schools and childcare section. I wonder if this isn't something worth working on more intensively, but not for this plan. For similar to when Tom was on the Planning Commission and said, listen, we don't have an economic development chapter. We really should. How about we put a recommendation in that the next plan make sure or explore the possibility of a chapter on economic development, and we did it. maybe we could have a similar general action item that the next plan explore the possibility of a community health chapter, so that we do it right. Because I think that the work that the Regional Planning Commission did was interesting, but also required a lot of time, energy, and feeding. And I'm not sure at this late stage in the game that we could just tack that on, respectfully.
That's what I was kind of getting at too, that it is a broader subject. And I was thinking about the ECOS plan as well as what I read in there and the initiatives that come from a state level to providing healthy, or to promoting healthy communities. I think you're right, Alex, that maybe trying to add something in, trying to find something to add something in isn't necessarily the way to go, but to broaden this subject to a larger conversation as we move forward, but not necessarily with this one. But that's not to say we couldn't find, if you had specifics, Michael, of how we could start by incorporating that into this one.
You could at least put a couple goals in here.
What do you think?
Acknowledging lack
What
of.
should we do?
Yeah, you got me off guard. Identifying the needs, for one thing. I mean, when you talk about a big picture thing, a simple goal would be create a goal for the next town plan would be a chapter on this. That's just a simple thing.
That could be the goal.
That could be a simple goal.
Yep. Of this very thing we're talking about to incorporate into the next. What is it, how many years do we do this, Alex, now?
8 is what
now?
we're compelled to, but we can do it as often as
We
the
do it every year if we
community
wanted to,
feels
yeah.
it's necessary. If there's a huge outcry about needing to add something to the plan, we can do it next year.
Joe, any thoughts on that? Does that? Oh.
Is in a place right now where we could go back at any, limited amount of time and whip up a chapter. I don't think any of us have studied the issue at all. I think the issues are important. I think they should be addressed, but I don't think it serves to do a quick job here.
No, yeah, that's exactly sort of what I'm thinking, that we could throw a couple statements in there, but what do they mean? I mean, but looking at it as a larger sort of.
Yeah, I think that some of the problems that Mike is speaking to rather well. I mean, they take an understanding of the statistics behind the problem that you think is there in order to figure out how to address them.
Mm-hmm. So I've got some language to add. I'm not sure which goal to add it under, but I was thinking in general government under 6.1 where Mike had started. And I can write that up for you to look at when you look at all these changes that talks about supporting healthy communities, children and families, and working on incorporating a community health chapter to the next town plan. And maybe a reference to the ECOS plan and what's contained therein as an example of some metrics that we could be looking at.
I mean, that seems reasonable. And I sort of agree with Joe that, if we just put a couple statements in there, there's a lot there and it would take some thought. But any comments from the board on that?
Well, I think it's worth doing for another plan or an addition to this plan, but it would warrant a lot of community discussion and see what people, how are we defining families and what's.
We could really take off on this one. There's a lot to cover here.
And
ECOS plan, Alex, how do other towns reference it? How do other towns use it as a tool? How are we using it as a tool?
From a pure procedural standpoint, all towns have to reference it in terms of their plan's compatibility with it.
Correct.
So there's a chapter in the introduction, there's a section in our plan that talks about the surrounding towns and how compatible or incompatible our plan is with theirs, and then the same mention made of the ECOS plan, which is just the Chittenden County Regional Plan with a fancy name. So we address it in general terms as to whether our plan is consistent with the regional plan. How do we actually use it? Not a lot in our plan. We don't reference it in many other sections. But I think that that might be a lost opportunity, and this might be a good topic that Mike's bringing up where we are losing the opportunity, because some of these issues that creep up in the community health arena are regional or statewide issues, and they're difficult for one municipality to address, but they still have impacts at the municipal level. So the ability to talk about some of the issues and make reference to goals and objectives that other regional entities might have and sort of refer people in those directions, I think would be a good thing. And then to the extent there are limited actions that we could take to address those items, we could flesh those out. Like Joe said, I think you have to understand the issues before you can understand what action items would actually make a difference.
And I think, to start that, thinking about that, I think back to every year at town meeting, all the money that we specifically call out for individual organizations.
Right, all the charitable contributions.
That we never have conversations about, no, not this one or not that one, but rather more for this one or more for that one. So
we do some in the
so
past,
I think,
but we
I
have
think
a
that
committee
a lot
that
of
looks
these,
at that.
this conversation could come out of something that we already do, practices that we're already
Certainly
thinking.
could be part of it.
Yeah.
I think that a corollary, which you're going to get to later, because it's in Chapter 8, is with regard to energy planning and with the recent legislation, Act 174, passed by the state, in order for municipalities and regional entities to have more say in the Public Service Board process for reviewing solar arrays and wind turbines, we have to update our plan and have very specific data about that. A lot of municipalities are going to rely on the regional plan to do the number crunching and sort of just refer to that, that information. I think this could be similar. A community health section of the plan could do more of the regional plan referencing, but it'll take some doing to figure out exactly how to do that and what we actually can have some real impact on at the local level.
That seemed like a good approach, Mike. Is that what you're...
Yes. Sorry. I should know better. Yes, but I keep thinking in my mind, 8 years down the road, we're going to finally put something in a town plan. And I'm wondering about infrastructure needs and something to push a little quicker. But I don't have any answers for that right now. I mean, we all...
Amendment to the town plan anytime. We don't have to wait 8 years. I mean, if a committee gets going and the planning commission takes it on, then it becomes an amendment to the town plan.
Right, but there is a lot to do in this plan, and I don't want to sugarcoat it. I think our capacity to take on a bigger project like that probably would wait for the next big update to the plan, which could be 8 years. So my suggestion would be that, and I'm not looking at you, Mike, because I'm just the way this is ordinate, but if there are specific sections of the plan that you think, like, here's a specific action item that should incorporate with something to the effect of with reference to the community health or impact on families or something like that.
Well, I think we might have talked about
we could
one
add
tonight.
those in if the board were amenable.
I think we've actually talked about one of those tonight when we've talked about the roads, widening the roads and for sidewalks, infrastructure for that. I think that's part of the, we've talked about that in that concept, but.
Well, so I'm just saying if
I don't want to throw something out.
If there are others where you're like, hey, if we could just, like Lenore said, if we could just add this word here for trails, maybe there's some action items where you might think, hey, if we could just add the word families here or community health here, I could try to work that in.
Okay, fair enough.
Are there any other specific items that you want to bring up?
With regard to the
Oh,
business.
I can't see your hand because it's hiding. Go ahead.
75, you could say, broke ground in 2016. Left column right on the bottom.
Yes, actually, I already have that change. You must have given that to me before.
I might have.
Lenore, did you have another item you wanted to?
Yeah, just some housekeeping items. On page 76, the left-hand column, the very top, 28 miles of publicly accessible trails. As of today, we have 32.
All right.
And then on the right-hand column, the second paragraph, last sentence, I believe at its meeting last week, the Conservation Commission has taken responsibility again for upkeep of the trails in Japrags.
So Lenore, the last phrase with the Trails Committee responsible for trail keep should just be deleted?
I guess.
Just say Conservation Commission is responsible for
Managing the-
managing the park and associated
Including,
trails?
including the trails, or? I suppose that would
All
do
of
it.
you okay with that change? These are
Housekeeping.
committee members in the trenches that appear to know what's going on. Okay, got it.
Any other specific comments?
It's been a little while since I've been over this section, but actually, services for the elderly and disabled. Should we not reference the churches? It seems like they have a great deal of space and maybe they're underutilized, especially for daytime activities for seniors.
Are you thinking of another action item to something to the effect of work collaboratively with the town's religious institutions or
Yeah.
churches to
Yeah.
to help with services for the for our elders?
I think that would be good.
Okay.
Yeah, and it may not just be in the elderly, though.
Oh, it could be children too.
Yeah, it could be anything. I think I can only speak for one church, but I would say, right now they certainly are open to providing facilities for all kinds of community services and whatnot. So that's a reasonable and some good coordination of that and understanding those resources are there. And they're not necessarily divided by certain religious lines,
Right.
like the blood drive, or the WIC lunches or whatever. So
Right, but
you're right.
I think what our religious institutions do to benefit the community is we could try to recognize that more broadly somewhere else in the plan, but in this section, I think Tom's point is there's a specific part of the community that we're calling out, and they have and they're getting there's possible connections there.
Yeah.
So I can add that as an action item. That's committing someone in this municipal family to, cross the church and state barrier and do a little outreach. So I'm not sure who I'm going to put as the responsible party when I add that to the spreadsheet at the end, but we can talk about that
Right.
at your other meeting.
Do we have a picture to insert for Kelly's Field and/or a senior lunch?
So all of the boxes that require pictures are still in need of pictures. So if anybody
that out
has
as a
these
public
pictures,
call, yeah.
please provide them to me. Otherwise, I'm going to be running around
The senior
with a
lunch,
camera.
yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Any other comments? Okay. Lacking more comments. The next steps, I guess,
So we're just going to keep on
Yep.
keeping on with chapters 7 and 8 at your
at the
next meeting.
the
which
second
is
meeting in June.
We've got the
First meeting in June.
Oh,
We'll do 2 chapters on the 8th.
Okay.
And then try to pack as many as we can into that second meeting in June. The idea being to make it as close to a single topic as part of that workload reconfiguration.
My hope is that at your second meeting in June, you'll see a version with track changes of this. So you'll be able to walk back through the chapters and say, did does it capture what you remember the discussion of the changes being? And it also gives you a final opportunity to, throw something else in so that we can then get to a hearing.
And it would be good, and I'll point at myself to make sure we have our comments sort of ready to go so that we can.
Yes, and Mary Lee did something very helpful, which was she sat with me or talked to me about just typographical changes and grammatical stuff that doesn't really require board level discussion, like, literally typographical stuff. So if you see any of those things, just give me a call and I'll just make the notes, and it doesn't have to take up time at the meeting.
Excellent. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Mike. The next item is we have a draft job description. I guess it's a draft, the job description and job advertisement for in anticipation of the town administrator search. Those are in our packet. Trevor?
Yep, the job description is the current version, which was, I think, adopted in late winter, early spring 2014, right before you did this the last time. And then the job advertisement was just, it's a fairly standard draft to look at to give you a place to start. If you, this one or an amended one, eventually where we'd look to post this would be on the VLCT website. There's a reciprocity agreement with some of the other municipal associations, so New Hampshire and Maine in particular would go on their job boards. I'd also look to post it on the ICMA, which is the International Manager Administrator Association. One of the primary job boards folks would look at who are in this field or interested in it. And then more locally, we might run it in 7 days for a little bit to make sure we're getting as many local hits as possible. Town website would be another place that it would be stationed, but those would be the primary ones. And it doesn't sound maybe like a lot of outlets, but it casts a pretty wide net once you walk out, how far that reach really is. And if you go forward with these tonight, you're still on that timeline that we put together for a prior conversation.
I'll say that I did take this draft advertisement, and I did share it with a couple of people who are sort of in the know of this kind of stuff, and did not really, and thought they were fine. There were no concerns or questions. So I'm somewhat comfortable with it, but.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that the last sentence in the second paragraph says town manager, so it should be consistent.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That would be
Man,
that
Travis.
would be very good fun, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. I don't know how many times I read that, Andrea, and I didn't even see that.
Yeah. And the assumption is Renee and Trevor both, oh, you said you didn't get a chance to look at that, right, Renee? Right. Yeah. Alex?
So they're hiring for this similar position in Milton. I was chatting with the planner there, and he was talking about how many employees the town manager supervises there, and they supervise department heads. And so I wonder if this might actually scare some people away by saying you supervise 22 full-time equivalent employees when that's not what the town administrator does.
It's fairly standard.
Is it? I wondered if it'd be more accurate to say how many people are direct reports versus how many, versus the full complement of employees in the organization.
X department heads with X amount of employees.
Yeah, I just wouldn't want somebody to look at that and say, wow, I can't supervise 22 people, when really you're supervising X number of department heads. You don't supervise the road crew members, right? Mike does that, and
I
similar.
ride with Hot Dog, tell him how great.
I mean, that's not a, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, the folks who are going to look at that SAT are going to know exactly what that means, and that it's a combination of department heads with whom they'll interact most frequently, but all of the employees might fall under that responsibility umbrella. This will not confuse your applicants if that's what you're concerned about.
You know, it is something to sort of consider, though. Any other thoughts or comments? We continue, go ahead, Alex.
Final one. The job description is, as I think others have recognized, daunting in its breadth. Finance director, HR, personnel manager, and everything else under the sun. So I'm not saying you change it. I've been advocating from day one when Trevor announced we ought to get a job ad out. So I still think so. But
Yeah.
just.
Yeah.
You know there's an issue there, so
Yeah,
I'm
I
just
think-
reiterating that. After having read it for tonight's meeting, I was like, wow, that's really the current job description? Wow, that's 3 people, not 1.
So I think we talked maybe last time about these sort of short-term goals and medium goals and sort of long-term. The goal or process, the longer term, is getting a committee together to actually screen the applicants and define the interviewing process, define the selection process. But in the meantime, you know, we'll be working on that committee at our next meeting and quite possibly being able to form that committee. That would be a great thing to do. But in the meantime, if we were able to get this advertisement out there, we can start that process. And so that the committee can get together and be prepared for the, you know, for when the ad closes. Marilee?
Can I move that the Select Board authorize the placement of this job advertisement modified with the manager position changed to the town administrator in the second paragraph?
Second.
So we have a motion to do that with that modification. Any more comments on it? Renee, you've had a chance to look at it now. Any comments or thoughts?
Not specifically.
And the placement again,
So we'll look to do the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. They have some reciprocity agreements with other New England municipal associations. The International City County Manager and Administrator Association, we'll look to do 7 days. We'll do the town website, and that gives us a pretty global reach. And the requirements, just having done these hiring processes at the league, and you set sort of your basic set of parameters, but when you get all of the applications, consider all of them. There have been success stories of folks with non-traditional backgrounds moving into these roles, be they military, business, other. So it's just an attempt to start to put a basic framework on it, but it's not meant to be exclusionary in any way. So that's one of the things we always advised folks to do back in the day.
Do you recall where you saw the ad when you applied?
I think I saw it on the league website. I'm a league alum, so I'm partial to that as and not an ICMA member and haven't been. So I look one place rather than another. But
you know, I think last time we had 50 over 50 applicants. So we have a motion, and I think, you know, it sounds like at least those 3 places you mentioned seemed appropriate. I'd suggest maybe we take just a look to see where we did last time, and between you and Renee could decide if it's appropriate to add something else.
Yep.
I don't know what that would be, but that could be considered.
I think the ones that he already mentioned are really the ones where we, you know, gained the candidates that we identified. Otherwise, I think we, last time it was recommended to utilize like Harvard, different ones, but that really didn't.
Yeah, the
Bring
grad
about.
school ones, that's, yeah, something folks will suggest, the grad school job boards, but I don't know. It all depends on what you're looking for, I guess. That is an option, but
Right.
Yeah, I would think they'd be looking too, right
Yeah.
about now. Marilee?
Do we want to look over the job description and maybe give ourselves the opportunity to change it? Is that a possibility?
I would suggest, based on the timeline, go with the one you've already vetted and adopted. Use that as your standard. I think there are some other conversations to be had about roles, responsibilities. There's a few more steps before you get to, I think, where you can really dive in and make that, if there are changes to be made.
Okay.
So I would suggest using that one. It is an awful lot for one person to do, but believe it or not, that's a fairly standard set of tasks. So it will feel familiar to a lot of applicants.
Okay.
But it does bear, you know, not to be lost in that is an awful lot to ask
Yeah.
an individual to do, but, you know, keep that in mind as you have that longer, larger conversation.
Any more discussion on the motion? So we'll vote on it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So none opposed. So that's good.
When you post it, Trevor or Renee, let me know. I'll post at the same time.
Next item on the agenda is just a discussion of purchasing policy. And it's really just an introduction. And Trevor, maybe you'll tell us why why this one?
This is me closing loops. I think I, at one point very early on, mentioned this is a potential policy to consider. Wanted to at least introduce a template to you before ending tenure. This is a model policy that the Vermont League of Cities and Towns has available, along with some introductory information. Comes from one of their handbooks. The idea is to better formalize the bid process, so you get, you know, that reliability. If there's any, you get better process elements, and you ensure consistency in their use. It's a chance to also define everybody's respective role in the purchasing process, as you talk about limits. And so there's a chance to have it fit into, you know, it might be that the board gets more comfortable having adopted a purchasing policy, and it enables the staff to then go out and purchase based on all the discussions that have been had about both the budget and how the policy, and then there's maybe some reporting mechanism. There are some of those things that it could lead to down the road, but at its very initial level, it tries to define the different types of services or purchases, how change orders are handled. So it just tries to put some formal criteria where we haven't maybe necessarily had as much as we like. We follow a lot of these things as best practices, but it's nice to better codify them if we can. So I just wanted to put it before you, have you think about it, have you look at it, just so it didn't get lost in the shuffle.
Marilee?
So where it says competitive bidding, while competitive bidding is not required under Vermont law, it can have significant advantages for local governments. So I'm just asking a simple question. If we develop this purchasing policy, we would have a choice, either say competitive bidding is the route we always follow, or not talk about it at all, or how would that work?
Yep, so one of the things that the model policy defines toward the bottom is when you might want to do some other, either limited bidder or a sole purchase, look for a sole provider because there's something specialized, be it a relationship that you have, or for example, with the nanofiltration system, you have a specialty product that also happens to be made by a local vendor. And if we went out and competitively bid that, it'd be hard to end up with that same combination of items. So when we go out and get a second nano train, it's unlikely we'd bid that. We have some rationale we could use as to why we would sole source those pieces. And then the other thing with the competitive bidding is we'd set it up, you'd want to set up in a way where it's essentially lowest responsible bidder. You want to, still allow some, we've gone through the process, we've weighed the bids out, but we don't ever want to be pinned in by the bid response that is 40% of the amount the others are. And then it also defines what are you going to do when you get the change orders, because if somebody's that much lower, chances are that's where they're going to look to make it, some of that ground back up. So it just tries to set some of that framework up while allowing just enough flexibility to do what's special or necessary. Yeah, we can.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a good idea, but at the same time, I think there's, in the bidding, it's like you don't necessarily always want to go with the low bidder.
No.
So,
It doesn't
Yeah.
mean you don't have competitive bidding.
right.
And we may look to steal language from some of our RFQs, which, it's the lowest responsible bidder combined with some language about we reserve the right to reject, modify,
Yes.
alter.
Yeah.
You combine those to try to give as much of that.
So this isn't actually a policy itself, it's some things to think about in forming a policy, is that correct?
It's a model policy, so it's based on, what the leagues developed through their resources as a fairly standard purchasing policy.
Okay.
There's then the option to take this model and adapt it in the best ways to suit Hinesburg's individual needs, desires. Yep.
Okay.
So a lot of this is just to show you what it looks like, what are the components, what are the things to start thinking about.
So we could adopt it pretty much as is, maybe with minor modifications, if we so chose?
We could copy it verbatim
Yeah.
if we wanted, right? I mean, it's not owned by anybody.
Nope.
And the process of adopting a policy like this, it's just the select board to approve that. I mean, I think we would, say, here's, if we were to move forward and we make a few changes and fill in the blanks, we would say, here's our proposed policy, let certainly all the department heads to have some input and town people but I mean, I like the idea of this. I tend to like to know what the rules are and that way it kind of, for me, you can't improve the process until you sort of define it. If everyone's doing their own thing, which we're not saying that's what's happening, but if everybody thinks these are how things are done and we're not all on the same page, then it's hard to, over the time, to improve it. My thought would be, we have some blanks here, and maybe I think Trevor and Renee would be good to sort of suggest what we think some of those, minimum levels should be. When, how much department head, if it's something's budgeted, how much a department head could go ahead and spend to, do whatever they want to do, buy tires for the trucks or blades for the plow. Any other thoughts?
And for the conflict of interests and ethics, we've already got that policy, so would we mention it here, or would we just drop that whole section? Because it would be obvious.
Yep, they would work in concert in this case, yeah. It's one of the advice, I think, is that if you don't have that separate ethics or conflict of interest policy, you can include that as a provision so that if, the most high-profile example is the governor owns a construction company, the state awards construction bids. you know, how you're going to handle those types of potential conflicts. And so
Yeah.
if you don't have the other policy, that's where this can be used to
Right,
to
but
sort
since
through
we
those.
do have it, we wouldn't even need to mention it here.
But does that other policy, our conflict of interest policy, apply to employees?
Applies to everyone, I think, as we adopted it.
Okay, as I thought it said.
I have to go back and look at it again,
Really, I think
though.
it was boards and commissions.
Yeah.
It didn't, I'm not sure that it did reference employees. So that's why I think this is good, because it does talk about employees.
Yep.
And this would apply to all our departments, but not the fire department?
I think they would generally abide by this. I don't know to what extent we could force them under the current construct to absolutely do it, but it is a best practice, and if money's running through our budget, you know, there is that ability to say, here are our standard provisions, and
To expect it.
the,
I don't
the
think they
practical
would
impact
push
is they're
back.
doing this often in terms of, let's
Yeah.
seek a couple of multiple bidders. They might have a preferred bidder in mind based on familiarity with the equipment and a comfort level with it, but, you know, seeking some of the alternate pricing. And sometimes it's also, one of the things is allowing for a little bit of flexibility. We often will try as a best practice, go out and get 3 prices for something. Some things, there just aren't
Three,
3, 4.
suppliers.
So
Yeah.
often it's, you know, do the best you can to get a broad array. You know, the loader being a good example of, we had two providers there. It's
I'm
meant
not-
to help and protect and not restrict. That might be a.
Right. I think, you know, again, I like this idea. It would be good, Trevor, for you, if possible, to sort of, so here, we had the, you know, so far we've done the conflict of interest, and we've got the purchasing. Are there 3 or 4 more that, you know, you have ideas on? It would be good to know that, so we can continue to march down this, what I think is a good, you know, way to go. And, I mean, if you're hiring a new town administrator, it'd be great to say, here are the policies we follow, so then it's like very clear. And, it would be good to know what existing policies we
Yes,
have.
I think
A
so.
list of what are the existing policies we have. So that sort of helps us wrap the whole thing up rather than, you know, sort of feeling kind of
Like
piecemeal.
the safety policies, what are the police policies and procedures?
It would be interesting. I don't know, is it easily found, do you think?
I think
It'd be good to just have an outline. We don't have to dig into them, but say, okay, here's what we have, and then you could say, hey, here are the next 3 we should work toward. I think that would be good.
Subsection on that would be also ordinances. You know, a list of
Well,
all
those are on the town website. They're not?
Not all of them.
One of the other, when we've done our 33 plus
That's on that list. of
42
33.
projects or however many it ended up being, we've talked about this policy idea and the ordinance idea is let's create 2 up-to-date books with full references for what was the, to as far back as we can go. Last time it was changed, amended, adopted, so that it's all right there for somebody. All the ordinances are in one place and fully up to date, and there's a table of contents, and same thing with the policy book. So you can always, at any point, digitally or physically, reach out and grab that and see what do we have, when's the last time we addressed it.
That's why I say I
Yeah.
kind of put those together as sort of
Yeah.
a like-minded thing.
Yep. Policy would be an easier place to start, but then ordinance as part 2 is certainly hanging out there as a need.
And sort of falling back to item 10, where we looked at the animal control ordinance, I did give myself a note saying, do we have a standard format for that? You know? And I think we started a standard format for the water and wastewater.
Yep.
So it'd be good to just embed that into that sort of format and as we, you know, as a draft. So that draft looks just like,
Cover page,
yeah, yeah,
date,
yeah,
title,
you know, fairly simple.
purpose, that kind of thing, yeah. What it covers.
Any more thoughts on this? Is everybody feeling like, yeah, let's move forward? So one suggestion was to fill in the blanks.
We'll frame it up a little.
Yeah, and maybe
Yep.
even, you know, this is sort of right out of theirs. Maybe you know, if you wanted to sort of propose any other changes, that would clarify it.
Yep.
And then sort of, here's a list of ones we have today. And here's the next couple, I think, if, you know, you're going to give us advice, these are the next two you might need. Sound all right?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that, Trevor.
Yeah,
I
this
think
is
it's a
great.
great idea.
One of the other things we dropped from a conversation Marilee and I had this afternoon that's in that same Dropbox folder, it's not numbered, but if you go in there, there's the copy of the rules and regulations for the orderly conduct of business
Oh, right.
from Essex. That's come up in other contexts. So that's in there just to, not necessarily as a policy discussion, but that was something we talked about tracking down for you, and we did it while we were discussing other stuff, so Marilee's the one who reminded me, so.
That was dropped in there?
Yep.
Guess I didn't notice
Yep.
that.
Yeah, that was this
Yeah,
afternoon when
I'm
we
just
were
noticing it
talking
now.
about
Thank
some
you.
other stuff, yep.
Okay. Are we good to move on? Town administrators report.
I'm at, one thing that's not, I think it's listed a little bit there, and we mentioned it before, I got mediation tomorrow for the McGee Hill Road Palmer
Oh,
Jr.
yeah.
So I don't know that we'll need a special to I'll have to figure out the timeline. I suppose I should say there's the potential for a special to ratify if we're able to come to a conclusion. If for some reason it can't wait till the 8th of June. But that would be the only wrinkle to that. And so Tyler is, through VLCT Passive, is our engineer on that one, has done a lot of the legwork, full, analysis of the different components. And then Phil Woodward's the attorney, and VLCT will be there with us. Very similar in a lot of ways to when we did the prior mediation, completely different topic, but a lot
Yeah.
of similarities. And that's in Middlebury, so I'd love to believe we'll be done in time, and it won't be a full day, but I've been told to prepare. Bring snacks, yeah.
Do you want to mention the May 18th?
Yep.
What's happening?
May 18th is the Vermont Town and City Managers and Administrators Association Conference. Day one, it's down at the Equinox in Manchester. We've signed Renee up because it's a good chance to go and meet folks who can be of assistance or can otherwise provide assistance. I may or may not attend. If I do, it's under my own cover, since you guys won't reap the benefits of whatever grand knowledge I gain. It would be from. So it's a possibility that I might be out on that day. We haven't quite crossed that. Because I also have T-ball practice, and I'd have to leave early, and so I'm weighing all of these things out.
And the Act 250 permit, this was
Yeah, this is because.
unexpected?
Yeah, it was. We don't, it's not our Act 250 permit. They dug in the basement and found out it's one that was issued to Chittenden Solid Waste in 1994, I believe. So it'll likely be an amendment to that we'll have to seek. But it does change the timeline a little bit. And Steve and his crew are working up a new timeline based on what that would be. But what that determination, we'll need water supply, wastewater, it starts to lay out some of the state permits, fire safety, things some we knew we were going to have to do, but the Act 250 was the wrinkle in that. With surveys scheduled for next week. That's a big early piece. Mike's already been moving earth for when you think about that site plan, the plateau where the building and the salt sand shed will sit. We've already started some of that earthwork, so. Testing out new loaders and.
Vermont gas work going along okay?
Yep, we had a meeting scheduled, it's been postponed all the time, so we're hopeful next Tuesday or Wednesday is what they suggested as the potential dates and times. So this will be, making sure we're checking off everything that's in that contractual arrangement, basically. I don't know if anybody else has heard. I've heard nothing on schedules for either that appeal or the Hannaford one, so I don't.
I mean, we're waiting for it to come out, right?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be midsummer, but
We'll let you know.
that's right. Send me a text.
I think it's important to note the next meeting is scheduled 6/8, that's a Thursday.
Yep.
For the next 3 months.
Right, and I will not be here, but my plan is to call
Still
in,
calling.
and you'll need to fill in.
And that will be at 7 PM.
Yep.
Right now, but
Could change.
My granddaughter is graduating 8th grade that day, but they haven't figured out what the time is, and they said it's probably afternoon.
Okay.
but I might be late. And I
Well, that
might
would be
not.
good to keep, well, I guess I can vote remotely, so, yeah, all right.
Yep.
Never mind. All right, any other items on town report? I think it's worth saying this is your last official town report, I guess, in this meeting, so just acknowledge that they've been excellent, and all your work has been excellent, so.
Thank you. Yep, it's your souvenir. I'll sign it. if you
Yeah.
want. Won't ever be worth anything, but I'll sign it if you want.
Next is Select Board Forum. Any,
One thing, the trees at the Bissonnet Fields, we're finally going to get them in the ground tomorrow. Kind of cobble it together with the wet conditions. It's been kind of
Yeah.
tough, but
no, but that's good.
Paul and I arranged tomorrow. Works for both of us, and I've got some help coming in. If anybody wants to chip in, they can as well. How did Green Up Day go?
Yeah, I think I can give a little report. I think Green Up Day went very well. It didn't rain, maybe a little in the morning, but not bad. A couple things, which I'm planning to put an article in the paper, but we totaled up, this is the first time we officially totaled up how many people actually came to get bags either early or on that day. So there were 75 people or more, a little bit more than that either, went to the library and signed up for bags or came here that morning for bags. So that's a pretty good amount. So then we expect there were actually more than that actually collecting trash.
But you gave out 250 bags.
We gave out 250 bags. We used more than that. Typically, that's about how many we've been using, a little more than 250. We collected about a full, 15 yards of tires and about 1.5 trucks of trash that was picked up. And I would say anecdotally, although I have data, 10 years ago, we were collecting 3 truckloads full of trash and then 1 truckload full of metal. So we had a very small amount of metal because a lot of it's already been recycled because it's worth money. And the tires have been about the same amount each year. So I think generally, anecdotally, yeah, we have picked up, in my opinion, we don't have like dumping areas now where we just know there's a pile of stuff that just gathers, and we have some roads that collect a lot of trash from convenience stores primarily, and not from them, but as you expand out. So overall, it went good. We had great help from the rec committee this year, so the lunch went very well. The Conservation Commission, of course, mans the trucks, and then just a lot of volunteers. It really is a rewarding thing to be a part of and just sort of watch people who, I went up one road around 8:30, and it was raining at that point, and there's a single person out there, doing the road, and I sort of stopped, and they were just motivated to, I drive by this all the time, and so it's very good. I am announcing that in my article. I'm going to say I'm looking to sort of step away from it after 16 years or more. So if nobody wants to pick up the baton, I'll continue, but I'm hoping that somebody sort of picks up the baton. I'll continue to support it, but maybe it's time to try a few new things too. So. But overall, I think Green Up went well, very well. I was quite pleased. And we basically, if you looked at the map, we basically covered every road. So I'd say at least over 90% of all the roads. Anything else with Select Board Forum? I've got one other item. So the good news was, Renee's, as of the 26th, will officially be the interim town administrator. Trevor will continue to support us for the time being, probably a couple days a week. And we talked about, pushing a few tasks to a couple of other people, and we'll continue to do that so the workload is not overwhelming. I've been the citizen has contacted me and said, what's happening? So I said, well, it's starting to happen, so I will give some basic facts. So information can go out in the Citizen tomorrow, and we'll put out an email notice to all the town employees that here's where we are, and here's how the process is moving forward. So I'll make sure those happen tomorrow, basically. That's the goal. So I think we're in, I think 4 weeks ago, we weren't quite sure where we were going, but here was our hope, and we're kind of moving along in a pretty good trajectory, I think, at this point. Marilee?
I think this would be a good time to commend you for being on time with the agenda, planning it well and sticking to the times. I think we're actually...
We're close, we're
Do I hear an
close.
adjournment?
Yeah. No, we have some more actions here. Unless anything more with Select Board Forum?
Well, I would also like to ditto what you said and really thank Trevor for all the good work he's done, and especially for all the help you've given me, Trevor, all the time that you've devoted to answering my many questions.
We're Metro buddies, too.
That's right.
What's that?
We went on down
Oh, on
to
the
DC.
plane to
Yeah.
DC, yeah.
All right, the next item is consider approving the minutes from May 1st. They were in the packet. We could entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes of May 1st.
I'll give you the second.
Any modifications necessary or suggested?
Just need the, as part of those motions, the rest of the language in there. Yeah, the resolutions.
So add resolutions in.
Yeah.
Okay. With that change, did we have a motion?
Yep.
And seconded? Sorry. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Are you waiting? Oh,
No.
Oh, okay. I think we're all approved. And where are we? Sorry. Consider approving the warrants.
I'll make that motion. They're right there for folks if they need them.
It's made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed? It's passed. And unless there's any comments, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And it's seconded by Marilee. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None? We are now closed.
What am I going to do with the next 2 hours?
I know. Good job.